you have some help to do it? Or?
Yeah. I mean, the actual execution of it, we have carpenters doing all of it. So I mean, but just doing the planning and the.
But this is one thing I don't understand. I have friends who's working like us, but they insist of then doing the thing at home, and I can understand that you can even see this therapeutic as like people almost do it as in a meditative state. But for me, it's just painful. I'm not that kind of hantverkare.
If you have the time, I mean, I quite enjoy it, but I would.
Do you enjoy it?
I enjoy like working with my hands as well, but
I'm not skilled
enough. I mean, I
can see some part of it, like putting up a lamp. That's okay. But doing the whole wallpaper or something, that's too much work for me. Yeah.
No, but this is like two different types of people. That people, I can get the example of my father and my uncle at summer. They were always wearing snicka pants the whole summer, right? And for them, that was, I don't know. My dad is a doctor, so for him, he loved it, right? And for me, I don't get. And I can understand the satisfaction of accomplishing and building, but that's not my personality. My wife wish it was.
So when we moved in, I did construct this platsbyggd bokhylla, from some. Nice. So I spent probably like 50, 80 hours or something, maybe 100.
Do you think there is a correlation between like software engineers that get satisfaction from actually building something and getting that working, and actually having building things with the hand and getting that?
Definitely, I think in this specific case, for me, it's always like when I'm kind of most motivated, it's about having this mental image of something that you can construct. You have a very clear idea about like this is the end, clear idea of the end result.
You're Bob the Builder, and then if it's machine learning or if it's
and then like you just can't think of anything else until you kind of shown that you could achieve this end goal or it wasn't possible or whatever. But it's a very strong driving force once you made a mental picture of something that you think is achievable and that you would like to verify or see. Then I can just stay in the zone until I achieve it, kind of.
I can subscribe to that feeling, and I can understand that. I wish I felt like that, but I get hung up on all my phobias or whatever you want to call it. Like I don't know how to do this. I get so anxious, and I'm a perfectionist, and so I spend researching the whole thing for 2 months. Pulling your thumb out. So for me, the whole process just becomes painful with anxiety. But with other people, you just get started, they do it, and very fulfilling, I guess.
That would be the case for me if I were trying to do the whole kind of refurbishment that we're doing now. I mean, that would just be a mess trying to.
So how did you do the planning? I sometimes wish that like if you go to IKEA's homepage or something, you could have some help in, here is a picture of my apartment. This is how I want to redecorate or plan the rooms and everything. But have you seen or used anything like that at some point?
Yeah, so I mean, on kind of the style point of view, you have kind of Pinterest and these things, just looking at a lot of getting inspiration from. Okay. And that's where my wife is a lot better than me, kind of just building up these Pinterest boards of inspiration. But then when it comes to kind of the actual figuring out what works, I'm an addict to SketchUp. This really? 3D drawing. So then you can really visualize in advance actually do the full. So
you did the SketchUp?
Yeah. So I had this laser, distance meter, so that I build a clone of the entire flat. So I can try out, and then you can just import most of the IKEA furniture and stuff. You can just import it as a 3D rendered. So
so this is next level refurbishment.
So then you can have a chance to really kind of. That's where I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want to kind of see exactly what it looks like, and we did that for the last refurbishment as well, and that helped a lot. But it's always, it's extremely time consuming.
How did you import, IKEA furniture into SketchUp? Do you have like a 3D model of those, or
they have a shop like you can, or not shop, it's for free. I mean, you can just go in and keyword search, and then you can just press import on, the kitchen method scope or whatever a lot of stuff is in there by enthusiasts mainly, and sometimes
so it's not official IKEA.
And then there are official ones as well, a few of them, but for IKEA, I think it's mainly. Since they're so big across the world, and there's definitely someone somewhere that rendered a certain.
But I think if we summarize this, I think we can drum up interest to do home refurbishment for a couple of more people that are a bit more techie than there are into their refurbishment. So you get the app is like a application. What is it? What is it called?
SketchUp. I think it was developed by Google. So it's a free version that they turned into only an available web version, which sucks a bit because it's usually quite slow to work.
And literally, you can render your 3D model of your.
It's an extremely kind of user-friendly way to do 3D CAD or like 3D. Yeah. So it's very much like just drag and drop, and you have this almost kind of augmented reality feeling that you can just drag in surfaces and shape things. So it's very much focused on enthusiasts rather than professionals.
And how does it work when you draw up your apartment? Like you go out and you take pictures with your...
No, you have to do it from scratch. You build, I mean, it's not one of those that automatically translates images to some 3D image. I just walk around with but it helps a lot having this laser like precise meter where you can just
measure out.
You have to measure everything, and then you draw out
this we can improve. This we can improve.
Reasoning.
You do a panoramic.
There are those tools as well. You could probably, but in my case, you construct it from scratch, and then you start with 2D surfaces and you drag them out into the walls and add the windows, and then you just start piece by piece with layers, like Photoshop style. Layer by layer build out a kind of clone of your home.
From an AI point of view, you're an AI expert. What are you missing in terms of I want to have a perfect planning of my apartment? What are you missing right now
for this kind of tooling? I think there's probably two. One is the cost to get started. So if you were to have, there's a lot of good sensors and methods to translate images, like if you just walk around your phone. There's already services for that. I just don't know one that's well integrated with the kind of SketchUp that that I've actually learned how to use. So that first step of use, there's definitely we've already kind of solved most of those problems to kind of just walk around for 5 minutes. And actually that's already something we were looking at a lot in the company, because we're in the business of selling and buying homes. So like having this kind of new ways of arranging viewings and getting kind of digital clones of your home. That's something we're looking into. So I think that's first step of just, not having to do the
effort to get
the clone basically. Then you can start the kind of experimentation.
AI to get the clone faster.
And then the other thing, exactly. Then the other thing is, I think we're also very close to kind of solution. It's just that they're not broadly kind of adapted yet. But the AR, augmented reality aspect, once you have this rendered in 3D, of course you want to step into it, right? You want to put on your VR glasses and just walk around and see like, are these doors like too big, or does it feel
this sofa is too narrow here now.
And that's not far away. That's like, it's just about connecting these pieces of software kind of.
I saw some kind of data set that they try to do like apartment planning and putting out, where should the couch be, where should the bed be, and everything. And they actually use transformers. Apparently the state of the art right now is a transformer-based solution where they generate different, plannings for the apartment.
Maybe I saw something on that as well. Yeah.
It's happening with the stuff.
And then this project, so then you're doing it with professionals coming in and doing different things.
Yeah. And then, so that's also where we a bit lucky. Have very good connections through my work, obviously, because we do work with a lot of carpenters or contractors to do fixes and light refurbishments of the homes that we buy and sell. So that's also nice to have. Also partly for just having someone that you trust and someone that is not ripping you off in terms of the price. We have a single firm that kind of supposed to take care of the kind of project management and all the subcontractors and stuff. So that feels good, but I think still we expect having to be there almost every other day, just checking things that it progresses as we intend, right? So
and how long do you need to be out of the house or apartment?
6 weeks, but we're counting on maybe 1 or 2 extra. You never know. We'll see. So roughly 6 weeks, 2 months, and we're going to move out completely, so we don't have to be in the mess.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, best of luck in renovating and refurbishing your apartment. I know it's a lot of work and can be a bit frustrating sometimes.
But nice when it's done.
It is very nice when it's done, for sure. But welcome here, Anders Huss. It's a pleasure to have you here. We've known each other for some time, and
thank you.
It's great to finally have a deep, long format discussion with you, I think.
It's exciting.
But let's start with about you. How would you describe yourself? Who is Anders Huss?
Who I am? Yeah, to start in that end, I guess I'm a 35-ish-year-old male. Live in Årsta, south of Stockholm, with my 2-year-old daughter and wife. I professionally have kind of a mixed background, maybe not the most typical kind of coder or person in machine learning. I've done everything from spending, I think, 6 or 7 years in the armed forces, a few of those in the Air Force as a helicopter pilot, And
isn't that every kid's dream to be a helicopter pilot?
Not mine. That was more of a random.
I would say jet pilot or helicopter pilot. Helicopter was quite high.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. But then I've always been very interested in kind of the science and engineering topics or areas. And as we discussed
before we move on, I think so many people are interested in this, and I am myself, and I actually only flown once, and never, been the driver, so to speak. Do you call it a driver or pilot or
pilot? I would
pilot.
say pilot.
Can you just describe what is the difficulty with being a pilot in a helicopter?
What's difficult about it? Or
what's special or difficult, compared to other?
So it's very much a operator's role, and if you want to be kind of a bit negative about it, it's much more about not doing something wrong than doing things right. In a sense, I mean, there's so many things that could go terribly wrong with very drastic consequences, and it's more about planning and training and executing things so that you stay on the right side of the risk.
Just describe all the controls that you have, very quickly at least.
Actually, in modern helicopters, kind of the challenge in kind of the motorisk, I mean, kind of the coordination challenges are not that big. I mean, anyone can learn to maneuver a modern helicopter in a couple of hours and kind of fly it. Okay. Maybe not, land it too nicely, but it's pretty straightforward. It's definitely a bit more challenging than fixed wings in the sense that it's more kind of a 3D
right
thing.
So what are the controls?
The controls, I mean, you have the cyclic stick that essentially adjusts your pitch and your roll angle, right? So you push it forward and the helicopter moves forward, also gaining speed and losing height unless you also pull in your collective stick, which is kind of the overall thrust. I mean, just the power that you get out of your rotor. So kind of getting started, you need to move the stick forward, you get more thrust, and then you would kind of pitch down, gain speed.
But it's a two-hand...
It's a two hands, and then you have two pedals, which is controlling the... God, I should really know these terms. But what's the
tilt,
I mean, basically, if you want to rotate around the y-axis, right? You have that's actually adjusting the thrust of your tail rotor, right?
All right.
So you're just doing this motion.
So is it one pedal to go this way and the other?
Yeah, it's a bit like...
So it's a little bit like...
Yeah. And then once you increase the thrust, right, you have more counter momentum. So then you need to compensate with the pedals to increase the thrust of your tail rotor as well, and so you don't start like getting this. So
you're really driving it with you have four sensors that need to work in unison. That's the coordination.
Yeah, pretty much, definitely. But then, as I said, on modern helicopters, you have all these stabilizing systems, and you even have full 3D autopilot. So you can basically. You could tell it to
that was
go from this point to this point.
So it can land automatically now with the latest ones? Or?
Pretty much. I mean, I think in helicopters it's rare to ever use it, or that you would have it to actually land fully. But you definitely use it for standing still if you're in, sea rescue. I mean, you could definitely just ask it to stay exactly on this kind of GPS coordinate at this height, and it will just stay there within, very small margins.
But I guess it's mainly control theory systems that still right, and little machine learning so far. I think it's very much more standard regulated. Yeah.
And what helicopters have you been flying the most, or what's your favorite? And stuff like this?
So our basic training was in Germany, actually, on the EC Eurocopter 135. It's the same one as the police and
That's
ambulance.
the one we all see, right? I live at Värmdö, and
exactly.
They go past.
They pass us a lot. We have
the Eurocopter.
Exactly, the Södersjukhuset on just the other side of the Årstaviken from us. You see them a lot. But that's where you can recognize it from the fenestra. They don't have an exposed tail rotor. It's kind of in the fan.
In the fan.
Yeah. So that one was I flew the most. You also have the BO 105, which is a very potent helicopter that can... I mean, that's kind of the Red Bull acrobatic flight, right? We use that a lot for training auto rotation, where you turn off your engine in the middle of the air, or you simulate that, you would lose the engine power, and then you can do auto rotation and safely land a helicopter without any thrust.
What is auto rotation?
That's a very, it's a specific kind of aerodynamic mode of flight where you utilize you basically do glider flight
with a helicopter.
So you have, you have quite a poor, what's it called?
aero
angle.
lift.
I mean, you don't get very far. I mean, a poor ratio of how far you get. I mean, you're moving towards the surface of the Earth pretty fast, but you can still do gliding. You can still maneuver, and you can still find a spot to land if you have enough altitude.
And have you landed like that, or you just try it?
Many times. You practice it.
So basically, landing it when it's almost like spinning like this.
Yeah. So you have to just get it in the right kind of attitude, and then kind of the incoming air from below keeps your rotor spinning. So you're doing kind of, I mean, when you drop one of those NAS or from the tree that you see, they fly very slow. So it acts a bit like a parachute because it kind of propels itself, but it's actually driven by air coming from below. So you do kind of this glide flight, and so you descend like 1,000 feet per minute, and you keep 60 knots forward speed, and you just and then you can have full maneuverability. You can steer it around, and you need to find a good spot. And then when you get closer to the ground, you increase your pitch so that you break a speed forward, and then you get even more air because you're breaking your speed, so that you can also gain some thrust, and you can actually land it completely 0 speed forward, 0 descent, and completely without any kind of.
So if you're really good, you can do it soft.
And if you have a helicopter that's not kind of overloaded with weight, etc., it's much safer actually than emergency landing an airplane. And helicopter, with the right conditions, you can land and then basically fix it and just fly away again without breaking anything. If you do proper.
But I don't get it. It's the whole helicopter spinning.
No. You keep the rotor.
The rotor is spinning by the air.
Even without the engine.
Because I was picturing.
No. It's a very special maneuver. That requires quite a bit more kind of coordination and training, for sure, than just maneuvering it.
Cool.
Yeah. It's
boy dream stuff.
I rarely think about these things, but you can probably get me started if you ask about.
And how did you? Were you going into the normal army, or how did you end up in the army, and piloting? Because that's always it's a dream for many, but really hard to reach that few that makes it the whole way.
So it was never a kind of clear or at all a kind of dream for me. I think it was kind of accidental, but definitely started with military service. And at that point, I had no clue if I actually wanted to try to avoid it or do it. But you do this test, and they tell you, oh, you're very well suited to do this. And then okay, so let's do it.
Banans called the helicopter pilot.
No, and then I was drafted for the amphibious corps, where I piloted high-speed vessels on the water, so stridsbåt 90. So that's kind of where it started. I mean, there's kind of similar
this
requirements.
This is 2 of my biggest.
Kind of similar requirements on, you should have good handling stress and coordination and stuff. So you did high-speed navigation. I did that for 15 months. And then when you kind of invested, 20 hours a day into this thing for 15 months, I felt that this is actually, why not kind of use these skills a bit more? So then I stayed and taught kind of the next generation of conscripts how to do high-speed navigation in the archipelago. So I spent 2.5 years kind of just in high-speed motorboat in the Stockholm archipelago all year round. That was a pretty amazing experience, a lot of fun.
So you were an instructor as well?
Yeah, then I stayed and worked as an instructor.
I don't know how many, if you live I live in Värmdö, in Swedish archipelago south, and if you know how it looks like with the grynnor and, where it's shallow, and if you ever gone in a stridsbåt 90, we have the Marinens dag.
Yeah.
I took my kids down there, and they drove the crap out of us. They strap us all in, and for some reason, me and my kids were sitting in the front, and then they do the full brake and all that.
Crash stop.
Yeah, crash stop, and then you realize these crazy people do this at pitch dark, navigating where it's like 5 meters here, 10 meters there, and how fast is we're going? Quite 40 knots in a quite big heavy vessel with jets. It's jets, right?
Yeah, it's water
jets.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing craft. It's an amazing craft.
That's
coolest.
That's always going to be a very surreal experience. Same when you do night vision goggles in helicopters. You put on this headset and you have this green small area where you can see anything, and then you go out for 2 hours navigating, maybe landing, doing some kind of, and get back. And when you get back to the room, 3 hours later, you're like, was I ever anywhere? Or was this like a computer game? Like, because it's so, and that feels a bit scary when you think about this like 20 ton in the air. Like it's the same with navigating in this. But stridsbåt.
But navigating Stridsbåt 90 in Swedish archipelago at night, 40 knots with those margins, where you basically you're how does it work, right? You're running on a chart. You know exactly, the Marines has their secret markers, so they know where to turn.
Yeah, but for when you're in a Stridsbåt 90, you pretty much go by, I mean, radar, regular sea charts where you have all the details, and obviously, I mean, if you can go by kind of the lighthouses and stuff as well in the dark, but typically you go by vision and radar, so you can. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, but that's tying it back to where we started. I mean, that's also a lot more about kind of. Definitely, it's about like really performing under pressure, but it's also about not making mistakes, right?
Exactly.
It's not about being like overly creative or figuring out completely new solutions to do stuff where maybe you would hope
discipline
what you're doing within kind of machine learning or develop, like being a developer or an entrepreneur. But so that's very different. I mean, there's some similarities for sure.
Stress management, I guess, is
maybe that would be one of them. But there's also very radical differences, and that's kind of what I think I figured out, that this is very inspiring from some aspects, but I was missing the opportunity to build stuff, to be creative and
creative stuff,
and to create stuff basically.
Awesome. Are you still certified to fly helicopters, or?
No, I haven't been in one since I left the Air Force, and not really. I mean, it would be a lot easier for me to get the certificates, but we don't need what's it called, like civilian. Whatever it's called. I mean,
you don't need the basic training.
No, we don't need the non. We only have like military certificates, and which makes sense for them because it's not as easy to quit and just fly for private.
Right.
So it's different with the fixed wings. They actually need some regular certificates. I mean, we have a lot of the kind of the complementary certificates that you need, but I couldn't just go and rent a helicopter. I would have to go through a lot of tests to get a civilian certificate as well.
Cool. So we could speak about this for a long time. I think it's like all the boyhood dreams about doing these kind of things. It's awesome. But you spent like 7 years or something in the army.
So that was 2.5 years, a bit over, doing the military service and then instructing. And then I left and I moved to England for a year, to London, and then I actually kind of started the path where I thought was actually what I was going to do, like at KTH, engineering physics and those things for 2 years. But then I was kind of tempted back by actually one of my close friends who were starting his training as a helicopter pilot in the Air Force. And I also got a letter home saying that you should apply, because we had, being from the combat craft of the Stridsbåt 90, you had very similar requirements for doing the piloting in the Air Force. So they actually asked you to apply, and then you're like, you can always apply. And then you go through this process of test after test after test, like a number of days. And it's of course very flattering once they say that you're accepted.
Because there are many that are trying, not so many accepted.
Yeah, sure. And so then, so then we were actually accepted, and I had to actually make a decision. And then I felt like, let's give it a chance. And then it's the full officers training. So it's 3 years of mixed of theory and just, actually a bachelor in kind of war science is what you get nowadays.
Nice.
And then a year of that was the basic flight training. And then I stayed only for 1 year after that, actually working. So horrible investment for the taxpayers. I'm very sad to say that. But
they trained you a lot, but they didn't stay for that long.
No, I didn't stay for that long.
But you also took 1 year in London, you said, and did more or less like a Tom Cruise cocktail kind of thing, right?
Well, I mean, having been.
What do you mean? He's following Tom Cruise, right? It's going to be a Top Gun and cocktail.
Exactly.
So I think after having been 2.5 years in an extremely controlled environment where someone basically tells you every hour of the day what to do, and you practice this very specific thing, I think I just felt that I needed to do something where I had no clue what I was going to do. I just basically decided to move to London without any plan. And my idea was maybe to play music, and I mean, get a job in a bar and just, party and do something completely different for some time. I didn't know for how long. But I also had some dreams at that time of, picking up my music interest and do maybe some.
So what was your music interest at that time?
At that time during high school, I did a lot of pop and rock, some heavy metal, playing in a rock band, playing the electric guitar.
Yeah. So basically, when you went to London, did you go there as a musician, as an army guy, or as a bartender?
As I had maybe a hidden dream to actually play some music. But not, I mean, that was not important. That wasn't the reason I went there.
You had fun.
I had fun. Yeah. But then I ended up working in this bar, as I guessed I would, kind of. And then there's a chain of weird events where I ended up kind of running the bar, or actually as a manager after I was then 20 years old and had no experience from that. But it was a very specific, actually, kind of experience, realizing that you could do something completely out of your comfort zone, having been doing something very different for a long time. And it was a very fun experience, and it was a very kind of teaching experience, very different from everything else I'd done after that. But it ended up being quite a lot of work, but also a lot of fun.
And what were the main experiences to, at quite young age, managing something and in this environment? And any lessons, like life lessons, you think you got out of that?
I think especially the kind of people you meet, the mix of people that apply for jobs in bars in London is mass. I mean, of course, they have some similarities, but it was everything from, dealing with people that actually turned up drunk or on drugs at work. Like how do you deal with that? From like bar fights to just also just kind of the organizational aspects of making sure the ordering of new stuff came in when they should, and changing so I actually have a certificate in beer and cellar quality to kind of operate these kegs with all the systems. So
you have your certificates, Stridsbåt 90, Eurocopter, keg 90 liters.
But if I were to connect it to kind of what I've been doing after that, going into startups and kind of the entrepreneurial side of things, I think it was a very much like a self-esteem boost, doing something completely different, and realize that it was also doable. And you can deal with new situation and just kind of take it as it comes, wing it a bit, and it works. Kind of that, and that's an important, I think, skill in
that was the next step, right? After the Swedish Air Force and that work, you moved into a startup, right?
Yeah. So I spent that year in England, and then as I said, moved back. I did 2 years of my bachelor's, and then I was drawn back into the Air Force for 4 years. And during that time, I finished the third year on my kind of on the side. I finished some of my studies, so that when I quit the Air Force, I could start directly with a master's in machine learning at KTH. So that's when I kind of, and during especially my time at this German air base, was nothing else to do in the evenings. That's when my interest really started that was like 2011, 12, when deep learning really started taking off. I mean, a lot of the image progress in image recognition analysis, and so that's kind of when I realized this was an area at all. Before that, machine learning and deep learning, and I started doing kind of a bit of hacking. I learned to program a bit during my first 2 years. I didn't start when I was 4 or 14, as some other. I started when I was 23 years old, at university. That's when I started coding. So then on my spare time, while at this German Air Force, that's when I started coding deep learning, basically. I think that was like Theano, was around this. And then I got more and more interested in that, and realized I needed to quit the Air Force and go into.
But do you remember what woke your interest for deep learning, or how did you experience that? Because it's not like some guys coding since they're 5, but this is like in middle of young adult life, you are recognizing what happened, or what was the pivoting moment where deep learning came on your radar?
I think it was gradual. At this stage, I just, knew it was a method and that machine learning was a thing. But it's hard to even remember kind of now. But then it was that's what got me applying for a master's in machine learning. And then obviously during the studies,
then you go deeper into the topic. You find a rabbit hole.
And then I had a great kickstart, I think, of my journey and career by joining. After my first year in the master's, I joined Otti, which was one of the AI startups at the time in Stockholm. And that was the kind of the best, I think, experience you could have. Like really, I think we did amazing, at that time, exciting things in deep learning, like close to research level. But in the product setting, and that's where I learned about, at that point, I still hadn't at all bought that, deep learning was really the big next thing. I was kind of quite skeptical, I think, and looking at other models, but then we started using a lot of convolutional networks to solve some of the problems we had, and dive deeper into that. And I got really early into sequential model, like recurrent neural networks and attention mechanisms and stuff around 2014.
Oh, really?
And it was so that's kind of that's when really I sparked my interest.
So did you start as a thesis student at that time, or?
Yeah, I started as an intern, kind of. So Lars Love Sjösen, who you know, of course, he was heading the machine learning team there. There were only 5 or 6 people in total at that time, and we were classmates when I started engineering physics. So he said I should join, and I did a summer internship that turned into a thesis work, and then turned into just full-time employment there.
And for people that don't know what it is and what they do, can you just describe briefly what the vision is?
Yeah, so the vision for what it was really to help consumers save electricity at home. So our homes is kind of one of the really big sources of energy usage, through kind of getting better information and understanding of how you consume electricity. So that boiled down to, the short version is that boiled down to how can you cheaply tell people and incentivize them to use less energy. And the approach that we took was through a method called disaggregation, or essentially source separation. It's called it's the classical cocktail party problem, where you have a mix of multiple signals, right? So if you measure the total electricity consumption at your fuse box or somewhere in your home, it's a mix of the consumption signals of all your appliances. So then you want to do the reverse operation of summing these signals and separating them into the individual, because this is what, if you in real time can display to people, now your floor heating is using this amount of energy, and you can present this in a nice way. You can have even notifications on, like, if you leave your stove on or whatever, that you have like real time understanding of it, that then it can incentivize people to save energy and save money and save the climate.
So you actually did have some hardware that you built, right?
That was initially, we thought we could avoid that by kind of using, or not avoid it, but so this was the data quality. After some time, we realized that initially we didn't intend to do it real time. We had more like aggregate kind of disaggregate it on kind of a daily level, so you can really understand which are the big consumers, where can I save energy. But then we realized to make this kind of engaging enough, and also have a lot of additional kind of value proposition of figuring out that, don't leave your stove on. And we need to realize within, a few minutes or something that you left something on, or that it's, then we had to go into much higher resolution data. And we turned suddenly into a hardware company, which challenges things a lot. But it's, in hindsight, it's amazing kind of what stuff we did, both in terms, the CTO at the time, Ali, he was an amazing skill set of, we built our own hardware to collect high resolution data, and then a lot of
you connected basically to one point in your apartment, and then from that aggregated signal, you should identify, did you actually turn on the stove right now, or the washer, or whatever?
What year is this?
So this was 2014, or the company started. God, it's so hard with 14, 15, I think. Yeah. No, wait. 2013, 14, something. You lose track of it.
It's an interesting time. I worked at Vattenfall from 2012 to 2018, 19. And I have a fairly good insight on the product development of Energy Watch and some of the...
of course. You must have been in contact.
Yes, I wasn't close to it, but the guys who were doing it were sitting next to me, sort of thing. So I wasn't working on those projects. But no, the challenge for the big companies, of course, that you need really hardcore tech competence from the hardware to, so... when you're trying to do that and you don't really have the skill sets, should you even try to do it, or should you better partner up with earlier for Vattenfall as an example? I know what I think.
Yeah, no, I for sure know what I think. I think we did a great job building the core technology that would make it possible to achieve the kind of things we achieved, or we wanted to achieve. But then I think it was hard to find a good fit, like how to monetize it, how to really integrate it in both people's habits and as make it real working product out of it. So there were all these, the business side of things. We were both running a track of kind of direct to consumers. So this hardware and app, just iPhone app kind of that you could use, but also the idea was definitely to collaborate with everything from the electricity meter makers to kind of have the technology integrated, so you didn't have the upfront cost of doing installation, that would already kind of be integrated in every electricity meter out there, and also collaborations with the big what's it called, the big utilities, electricity companies.
Can you go a bit deeper into how the solution works? So given you had this kind of aggregated, potentially high resolution signal about how much electricity you are using. How did you actually do the source separation into different devices?
There were a lot of different approaches that we tried through those years, but kind of in essence, it's definitely a sequential problem where you have, there's a very specific domain. There is the signal, the electricity consumption signal, but actually it's not truly from one signal, because with our hardware, we measure the 3 phases. So you have a lot of information also in the phase shifts, like the way that voltage and current. So you actually have 3 signals.
3 signals going to different phases and inside the proboscope.
And you can basically measure both the voltage and the current. So you sort of have actually 6 signals. Therefore, the same aggregated signal, but you actually have a little bit higher dimension. And then we measured at, several kilohertz. We could measure even in hundreds of kilohertz.
Really?
But the signal we operated on were typically in the range of kilohertz, because that's when you really start. So before that,
okay, it's not necessary. It seems excessive to me.
Yeah, we were initially operating on basically 1 hertz data that we could get out to what we call the blink meter. So already you have this diode. Maybe you know what, in every electricity meter in Sweden, you have a small diode. Yeah. Some insane engineering decision that because it shouldn't sort of favor any specific interface like USB or something, you had a diode blinking at the rate of your consumption. So that was the initial. So we actually developed our first hardware, was a tiny hardware, much simpler one. Was kind of a optical reader of that diode. And then your resolution is actually proportional to your consumption, since you have a fixed blink that's proportional. So at high consumption, you have high resolution because you have frequent blinking, but sorry. Sorry. But then at low resolution, you had lower consumption, low resolution. But then we realized that, from that, you can do this kind of weekly, daily breakdown, roughly. How much is your stove? How much is your heating system? And that's what a lot of the other players did. They did even energy watch. And that was what kind of our competitors initially, but we realized to make any sort of this product interesting enough for consumers to actually use it. That's the only way to make an impact, to make people care about electricity. We need something much, much better, something that's real time, which wasn't at all in there initially, and something that's very accurate in detecting each single appliance. So then you need to go into much higher resolution data, because it's just not possible to do it. If you're going to tell people that now your washing machine is on when it's not every now and then, because there's some similarity, you lose trust in it immediately. So we had to go we chose to go the route of getting much better resolution of data. And then you can really look at, kind of the response of individual electrical components within your dishwasher. So when the pump starts, you get all the specific, like there's loads of information.
So do you can you go a bit more deeper?
Yeah, sure.
You annotate stuff?
Yes. So there's actually not really any secret about this at all. So we invested heavily. That's also one of the important learnings for me. I think we invested very heavily in data collection very early on. Also a great decision from our CTO at the time, that we invested in hardware to basically put out smart meters. We had this Watty families that were our data collection families. And we had a data collection officer with a data collection team that just went out to homes and installed this host of hardware during a number of months, where you put our hardware, the kind of mains, this aggregated signal as the input. And then we also put smart meters on every single appliance in your home. Oh, okay. So we collected ground truth data.
So then you didn't have the aggregate, you actually had a separate meter for every.
Yeah, exactly. We had the aggregate, obviously, because that's where our expected input signal, but then we also measured ground truth from these homes.
To prove
so this is it's a huge and I think quite valuable data set that we created. So we did this over a number of years from hundreds of homes for months. Oh, really? Where we have, so this, there's also I think we collected at initially at 2 kilohertz, but then later at even hundreds of kilohertz. So there's also actually quite a huge data set that we collected. So it was very much set up for supervised learning. So you had this months of data from a home where you have this expected input 3-phase voltage and current signal, and then the actual consumption for all the appliances as a target. So it was set up for supervised learning.
And it's similar to like audio. You mentioned source separation, which normally in audio is like trying to identify the voice or the drums or the guitar or whatnot. Did you do the whole spectrogram kind of?
Yeah, we did try to. We worked on everything from just quite successfully applying convolutional networks directly to these signals when you were in the range of like hertz and up. So like if you're looking at half an hour, or even actually much lower signal, much higher resolution, then, just applying convolutional networks is actually what we ended up doing a lot. But we also tried
on the raw time series data, or
on the raw time series data. That was actually what we had mostly in production. A lot of convolution, but that combined with recurrent networks. I could talk ages about that, but I mean, the interesting
Why
thing.
not do a short Fourier transform on that? And
so I mean, Fourier transforms I think are very efficient on. I mean, I think it was seen this development in speech, right? So for any kind of music or anything that has these natural notes and frequencies, it makes a lot of sense to do Fourier transform. But I mean, it's in our case, I think we tried it a lot, but it just gave better performance. So you have very specific shapes. When you start a microwave, you have during half a second, you have a super weirdly shaped spike. That's almost the same.
You have signatures.
Yeah, signatures. And these, I mean, we just figured that sampling at a certain, I think in this case, maybe you had, so maybe 100 hertz. So say 200 data points in the time series around half a second window. That's exactly what you need. And you can, with 99.9% accuracy or F1 score, say that this is a microwave starting. So that was just from, just trying out things out. We turned out that convolutional networks apply to the raw signal at some resolutions, at least, were a very efficient approach.
So that one-dimensional convolutional layers then? Or?
Yeah, exactly. But then, if you were to apply it on, you could have, definitely convolutions were done in one dimension. Yeah. But that's the same, and even if you would use a spectrogram, you would still do maybe convolution on top of it.
But then two-dimensional.
Sure. It depends. But then you had the challenge of this. You had this very local but rare information, right? You start your microwave, but then you also that's a very specific signature at the time of start. But then you want to figure out during the range of minutes, or for a washing machine in the range of hours when it stops again. So you need to go everything from like kilohertz of resolution, very, very local signatures, to hours or days of resolution. So how do you kind of optimize this end to end? Because we wanted to continuously show you your washing machine is on or not, and now it's stopped, now it's started. Right. So it's a huge range of kind of scales where you want to have efficiency. So what we ended up doing, and this was one of my kind of really kind of pet project, the things that I was really, really interested in, that at the time we developed, at the time I wasn't aware of kind of similar things, but we developed what I call, I think, a synchronous time series recurrent neural networks. So you had a mix of regular signals, a mix of signals that are sampled at a certain frequency. So you get, let's say, a window of a minute of data that you get in like a rolling window every half minute. So that's like a regular time series that you can expect, and that's processed through a convolutional network. That's some embedding, some representation, and then on top of that you have data dependent signals. So they are actually triggered on some heuristic. So when there is a big enough jump, right? If there's a big step change in the energy, then you sample like 2K hertz resolution for half a second around that.
So you have some rules that triggered at some point.
So that's what I mean. Like there's no fixed resolution, fixed frequency of the incoming data. So you have these streams, and then you might have a few of those rules. So you have different pre-processing layers or different pre-processing. So what actually gets into your then recurrent neural network is embeddings that are from different domains. One is, on 1 hertz data, one is on 3-phase, 1 kilohertz data, but very, very short windows. So you have this mix of signals that you just merge in chronological order, and you make sure that they map the data into the same space. So the same 526 floats, right? And then you feed that into recurrent neural network. So our whole solution was pretty much end-to-end a recurrent neural network, because we had 1 hertz, one
with convolutions though.
With convolution as kind of processing the input.
Yes.
But then the output of the convolutions were fed into recurrent neural network.
But it was trained end-to-end, including.
It was trained end-to-end. Yes. So this was, and it was really, it was very successfully so, because then you were in real time. So when you put on your microwave, you would within 1 or 2 seconds, it would show up. Your microwave is on in your mobile phone, and then it went through our networks. Through the 3G at first, and then through our pipeline of services, and through the actual convolutional neural network and the RNN, and then pushed back as a pushed back to your phone within 2 or 3 seconds. So it was really real time. And I was like seeing this in
nice.
I think as an engineering effort, it was a really fun and amazing project. But then on the kind of product side and the commercial side, we kind of failed to really make it.
So hard to get the monetization, right? I mean, like this is a core topic in itself to go into monetization topic, but here you have as a problem you have solved and made it working as a real time, AI system. Quite cool.
It was amazing. But then of course we should also say that, but of course it wasn't perfect. I mean, it was amazing that it did work and it worked in many cases, but then of course there were all these outliers that we still had to solve at the time. I mean, it would still say for 5% of the home, sometimes you would say your washing machine is on when, it was something completely different. So it was never, but I think we were very well set up to continue by data collection to optimize it. And we also had this crowdsourcing idea that you could walk around, since it was real time, you could start an appliance and it would start, something, we recognize a signal, and then you could label it. So this was my coffee machine. Yeah. So that was also a way to crowdsource the labeling. And that we just started that at the time. So I think we could definitely have achieved.
But if I compare it with Energy Watch, really much simpler, where you need to label it yourself at home.
Yeah.
So
I think it was based on...
Not really AI at all.
I don't know exactly what methods were used, but it's under the hood. But
in my understanding, not so... done it basically, you need to go out and label your consumers, turn them on, turn them off, and see how it spikes, and then it shows up. So cool, it works, but not like this.
But it was, to go back, it was an amazing start, kind of having the resources and the kind of team and mentors to work with this. It was super, super exciting.
A really innovative startup, I think, at that time, 2014 already. So
that's the point, actually.
Yeah. Cool, but then you moved on to another company at some point. How did that happen?
So I think after after a year or two, I took over as heading the machine learning team at Wotti, and then I was kind of split between kind of the building a company and team versus doing the really low level kind of research things. And then I just kind of got this opportunity, got in contact with the founder of Sana Labs, that I think of Anders, and they were extremely early at that stage, and we're looking for someone to head their technical development. Basically, they had done a lot of market research and some proof of concepts on the tech side, but now wanted to start building the product. And I was kind of fascinated by the idea and the ambition that Sana Labs had, and I, despite being kind of very still happy at the work at Wotti, I jumped on this opportunity and joined.
And just describe briefly, what's the vision of Sana Labs?
So the vision for Sana Labs was, really to boost and improve education for everyone through personalization, which in turn is kind of achievable through in a scalable way through machine learning and AI.
It's we've spoken so much about education, and how poorly, educational systems works and how they don't really personalize the education at all in so many ways. And I think Sana Labs is truly one of the more innovative companies that we have, not only in Sweden, but actually in Europe, I would say, in terms of education. So I think it's a really impressive company.
The hype around Sana Lab 2021 compared to 3 or 4 years ago, Sana Lab was not on the radar in that way. I think that it is. I think in the community, Sana Lab is clearly on the radar the last couple of years. Maybe they were already then.
I think we were always good at creating hype, but
maybe they were.
No, but at marketing. But yeah, no, definitely. There is a very real place for this kind of technology and solutions.
But they are good at marketing. They are good at storytelling.
Good at that, and also kind of a bit unusual approach that when I joined, I think it was the 5th, then 3rd on the tech side. So they had already 2 data scientists at the time. They'd already done like a year and a half or more of kind of just market research, kind of analyzing market, building up the networks. And so I think Joel and Anna at the time, that they had just a lot of work before starting to build a product, which has, its pros and its cons, but it's a bit different than, being very, very deep tech, like what they just
start.
Or, nothing is black and white, but it's, was a very different approach. And I think.
And you see the pros and cons. Here we have the tech start that then understands, okay, how do I fit? And here we have more thinking about what the market is and market research. Pros and cons, you see?
So, for me, it was a bit of a clash in the sense that I had always at Woti, I was kind of very slowly growing into the company. I had like spent day and night for years thinking about this very specific, very well framed problem. Like really, it's like this supervised problem. We collect the data we need. You just need to optimize the hell out of the models to really solve this kind of with machine learning. When I get to Sana, and like there is even kind of trying to frame the problem such that it becomes some kind of technical problem is like an insane challenge. So that was a big kind of difference for me, like having used kind of the way that I maybe led the team and set up goals, etc. I had been very kind of comfortable in this kind of isolated problem that I felt I just knew out and in, right, in my sleep, kind of, whereas going to this new, like realizing we have, like, what should we even do? Like, where should we even start? So it was very much this early stage on figuring out the product. And I think we also realized early on that, you know, there's a very true kind of ambition and regarding really utilizing the latest in deep learning and machine learning to achieve the end goals. But at the time, it was really about everything else, like, you know, just figuring out how to frame the first pieces of the product to make it integrate. Like at the time, it was mainly focused on an API for personalization of existing online learning products, and then, I mean, all the challenges were around kind of just how to design this API and how to integrate with customers, explain to them. So to kind of
first we need to just describe a bit more, you know, what is really the product of Sana Labs. But you started as CTO directly, or did you actually?
Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
But if you were to still, you know, I'm forcing Henrik sometimes, you know, do the elevator pitch or describe, you know, what is the vision, what is the product, and try to describe it as concretely and as briefly as you can. What is the product that Sana Labs try to build?
So I'm not the right person to do it at this stage, because it's a long time ago. It's a very different company nowadays and very different. Okay. But at the time, it was really kind of, AI for education. Education should really kind of be personalized, and by doing that,
so it was not education about AI. It was really using AI for education.
Yeah, to facilitate and improve the way that we learn. Yes. And then just extrapolating from that, there's an insane amount of value creation. Like if we can learn faster, if we can learn more efficiently, like it just has great impact on a lot of things. So our idea was to build kind of a platform to integrate into existing digital online learning products, where you would
what, like universities or like online courses or what?
Yeah, at the time we focused on things that already were digital and online, and established that there were data available. So essentially, the focus was really personalization. So by tracking all the interactions of a learner in their interaction with content, like what content they interacted with and how they answered maybe quizzes, etc., to build up kind of a representation, understanding of this learner, and then build a recommendation engine, essentially. Like that could be integrated in the curriculum or the workflow of this digital learning apps. So you could make something more engaging and more personalized to that individual, and by that just improve how quickly you learn, basically.
Yeah. Cool. And can you just, before we spent far too much time, I think, speaking about your background, and we should really move into your current work, but still, can you just mention very briefly, at least, you know, what was the solution to try to build a recommender system that could basically personalize the education? If you just very briefly speak in general sense about how you accomplished that. So we did, within kind of half a year, we did build the API and integrate with real customers, and that was, I mean, a great experience in a rather short time, seeing it alive with these customers. But I would say in the beginning, it was very much more about finding the right abstractions and interfaces to make it integratable with an existing solution, and very little focus on the actual kind of machine learning optimization of which makes a lot of sense, right? And then you need to have all the supporting system around it and infrastructure around
exactly.
it before you can.
So the actual kind of recommendation engine was quite simple heuristics, right? Based on maybe spaced repetition, that, you know, there's some quite well-known simple algorithms around how you can recommend content if you want to kind of memorize it. And so these more kind of more skill-based training. So maybe not, you know, very complex abstract topics, but rather, you know, learning vocabulary for language and those kind of more this high frequency of interactions. And there is more like maybe memorization or this kind of, that was a good place to start for doing data-driven optimization and personalization. So we did that, but then I think where the transition now is kind of realizing that this needs to be so well integrated with content creation, getting all the analytics, getting all the data feedback to those that create the content. So actually that, as I understand, they transitioned into building more of a full platform for both hosting content, for actually like a full stack solution for digital learning.
Oh. So they actually do publish the courses themselves.
Exactly. So it's like an engine and a platform to rather than, I mean, but now I'm not, as I said, it's been a while since but rather than just having the kind of API solution. And I think that makes sense. Like there were maybe two big challenges in kind of the integration challenges around the API, but rather kind of, it needs to be kind of seamless integration of all the analytics, the content creation, and the learner's experience. So I think kind of it makes some sense to try out that path rather than just having kind of an API. One. Then you have the problem of one API fitting all the services, even if you want to really do a personalization. But
we should probably take it when we come in if we look at different topics. But we are stumbling on a very, very important topic when it comes to building data and AI systems, and looking at this also from sort of the traditional company, Scania, Vattenfall, Alfa Laval, or whoever. The situation when you have a very concrete problem and you really, really know what the data and AI problem is, and you now need to figure it out, like the WOTI situation, versus where you think you have a pretty good idea, but the actual journey starts in another end to define the business problem in order to translate it into a data and AI problem.
Yeah.
So that is a quite big thing, right? Where I think a lot of companies stumble when they try to get started. They don't even recognize the two different, it's very different approaches, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think this is hard, right? For a lot of companies to get started with data and AI, and even to recognize that, well, sometimes this is quite clear, right? And you need your sensor, you can do it on the lawnmower, and you can get that. This is very easily defined problem. Now we turn it in. And here, actually, the real problem is to define the business problem in a way.
Absolutely. So that's, I mean, a very different skill set needed, and combination of skills, I think. So in the WOTI case, it was already kind of
clear.
Yeah, already decided and translated to a pretty pure engineering problem, right? That's solved with engineering and with the data and machine learning. Whereas in the later case, there was a lot of steps to figure out how to translate properly the end goal
to
the user problem to translate it properly into an engineering and machine learning problem, right? There was many steps there.
And this is huge difference then in the skill sets.
Yeah,
of the team.
For sure. Yeah.
And at the profile, not skill set. Yeah. Profile of the team. Like this is not a one-man show. This is like different.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. How
players.
to build up the team, build up the. I mean, just.
But it's a good example that you had in your career that you realized and learned this the hard way,
exactly.
the real way.
Yeah, exactly. It's for sure.
Nice.
I mean, you certainly worked in a set of very interesting companies, more really high-end AI companies. And speaking about that, the next step, you moved into another company called Peltorin as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, go low end. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Cool. Can you just talk a bit briefly about how that move happened and why you became interested in that?
I mean, let's maybe not get stuck too long on all the details, but at the time, so I was at Sana roughly a year, and I had been working extremely hard kind of at WOTI during those years, and at Sana also with a lot of, this mix of just raising money, meeting, recruiting, and then trying to build something where, there was so many uncertainties, etc. So I kind of felt at the time we were expecting our daughter, who's now 2 years old. And I think at the time it was a mix of things that made, maybe this is not optimal to be in this extremely kind of fast growth, challenging environment while having kids. So that was part of it. But also I think I felt it was maybe a bit too early to go into a CTO role where you're supposed to focus on really all the challenges. I mean, this kind of really translating the end user problem into all these engineering problems, etc. And I felt I wanted to spend more time on actually coding. I mean, really learning to code and still having hands-on I'm working with somewhere where, my specific skills in deep learning and machine learning were already applicable to some extent, rather than maybe in 2 years or 3 years, right? So that was felt I was maybe a bit too early. So I basically just took a bit of a time out, and I took a couple of months off, took some courses at KTH that I felt like maybe a good start to get back on coding, and that I hadn't taken. And then we had our our amazing daughter, and I had such a good chance to I had 2 or 3 months completely off. Like, I mean, I didn't have a job, so I could just nothing dragging my interests away from that. So I can really recommend if you have the chance having your first child without too many distractions, it's an extreme luxury that I'm extremely grateful for. So that was a nice kind of 4 or 5 months of focusing on that. Pretty amazing, and giving myself some time to hack on some side projects, maybe thinking about starting something of my own. But at the same time, I'd been in contact with the founders and other people at Peltarion for a long time. And the other thing I was kind of missing was, at the time, the biggest company I had been to was Votti, and we were around 30 people when I left for Sana Labs. And we were only around 8 people or so at Sana Labs when I left at that time. So I mean, I was maybe going towards a little bit bigger company where there's a bigger mix of skills already, and somewhere where there's lots of very skilled people. And then Peltarion scored very high on that on that scale, and I had already pretty good understanding of the team and the problems you were working on. So in the end, that turned out to be the next move to go to a company where I expected to have to really be coding and working on kind of machine learning related problems, but also the chance to work on a kind of a bit of a meta problem of having been hands-on with working with a very specific problem, solving it with deep learning, versus at Peltarion building more general solution to make it possible for other people to apply deep learning with less skills, I guess. So that was also quite interesting, because you've had, of course, thought a lot about how you would like to improve your tooling and your kind of infrastructure to simplify your work. But then when you're in the middle of it, you never have time to kind of build all these amazing tools that you would like to have. But now you got a chance to only focus on building a generalized platform, generalized tools to do deep learning. So that was kind of a compelling kind of thing to work on for a bit.
Sure. Cool. And then you suddenly had the idea, now it's time to start my own thing,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So that was had a break while I was on parental leave. And it was just, again, twist of events, kind of getting in contact with the founders of Movesta, where I am currently. And I think during my time at Peltarion, I realized, I mean, it's a great experience, amazing place to kind of, amazing people, a very, very nice and comfortable workplace, interesting problems. But I think I was lacking the kind of this edge of feeling that I was really, really, really mattered what I did, and really kind of being earlier in a startup, like having, setting the full kind of path, deciding where to go myself, even though I intentionally chose not to do that in Peltarion. I was already longing back towards that, but especially it was just...
It's a drug.
It is a little bit, I think. And also, I mean, just hearing about the vision from the other founders at Movesta, it just felt like such an exciting problem to work on, and have the chance to start a journey from kind of start with them was just a bit too compelling. So that's when I... And what was
Movesta? What was the vision, and what was Movesta when you joined, and what was the vision that you jumped onto?
I think it was and is very much the same. So I think, I mean, nowadays it's such a painful process to sell and buy your home, or sell your home, or move homes. I mean, now on average you spend it takes 100 days. A lot of people said it's one of the most stressful experience they ever have in their life. So currently, kind of the status quo, it's slow, it's stressful and inconvenient to sell your home, and it's uncertain. So we really try to offer something radically different experience, where it's fast and predictable and convenient. So really, what our kind of tagline is, moving people's life, and we do that by currently what our focus on is offering kind of an instant buying service. So when you're thinking about moving and you want to sell your home, you can go on our website, fill out a form, and within 24 hours, you basically input basic details about your home that you want to sell. And within 24 hours, we get back to you with a cash offer, essentially. And if you're happy with this, this is where it feels like a reasonable price for my home, then you can, if you choose to, you can move out the day after and have the money on your account, and you could leave everything behind. We'll take care of all the details. So really we're trying to, take away all the uncertainty, all the time consuming efforts away from you. And we're handling it for you. So you can, you can have peace of mind and know exactly what you get, and simplify your whole kind of experience of selling. And through this, really hope to kind of solve this. Now you kind of have to figure out, should I sell first? Should I buy first? If you sell first, you risk being out of somewhere to live for several months. If you buy first, you have no idea how much you actually will get for your current home. So you might end up with buying for more than you actually can afford. So this, we believe, causes a lot of friction right on the market, and makes it less liquid, the market, less motion. So we really believe that, and it also looked the same for kind of the past 50, 100 years. The biggest thing that happened is that you have digital ways of browsing. You can browse Hemnet and Woola, you can, but really in its core, nothing has really changed.
The analog process is computerized.
Yeah. Lift and shift, right?
Lift and shift.
Digitalized, not digitized.
Okay, this is the trend. Which one is which? When you have an analog process that you computerize, is this digitalization or is it digitization? Which one is it? We argue about that.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Which one is which? When you really transform your business, is that digitalization or is that digitization? If I flip it,
I don't know. But
do we argue about that?
The later,
I'm joking. I'm not sure.
The later sounds more right to me. Digitalization, but I don't know.
It's a joke. I was just. It's just funny because the joke is there are so many words that we're using all the time.
Yeah.
And what we are saying is, like, in plain words, when you're putting data and AI on top of the analog process, it's not the same to fundamentally redo the core first principles ideas of how the core business works. And this is what you meant with Hemnet, yes.
Yeah.
So it's a digitalization with Hemnet and not a digitization.
No, okay, that makes
which
sense.
Which one is which? This is what I wonder.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're not arguing, but I'm actually insecure which one is which.
Yeah. In my view, at least, digitalization is more lift and shift than digitization. But awesome. Okay, so let me see if I understand this correctly. So if you go and you want to sell your house and you go to Movesta, you can basically fill out the form and you get an offer in like 24 hours or something. What happens then? What do? You basically give them the money, but you have to do something afterwards.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. So as the customer, you get the offer. So typically we have to confirm a few additional questions during the call, but then we give you a kind of what we believe is the best kind of possible market value, which this is what your property is worth on the market.
So they can predict what the value will be. Exactly. You don't know because we don't have a buyer yet.
No, exactly. We don't have. So we say this is what your home is worth on the open market. Yeah. And then we of course have to take a discount on that to cover kind of the fee for the service that we offer. So the service that we currently offer is really taking away all the time, all the inconveniences of finding a broker, negotiating the price with the broker, having open viewings, cleaning your home. And then
so you can basically leave the home as is and you will fix it.
So you can, so basically, we give you, this is what you can get. And then you have, typically this is valid for 3 months. So then you can try to find a new home before you actually decide to go for this, or you can try to sell it on the open market, but you have a very kind of safe baseline. This is what we can offer you this.
And in those 3 homes, 3 months, if I now go and look for a house, boom, I can get my cash.
Yes, you can decide exactly when you want to
move out. So the contract is valid for 3 months.
It depends a little bit. Yeah, exactly. But the offer is valid for a fixed time period. And then if you decide to go for it, it's completely up to you. But then there's no additional costs, and we can take care of everything for you. So if you want to leave your furniture where they are, you can just move out and leave whatever you feel is inconvenient to us, and we'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the service. But then I guess maybe towards your question, so what do we do then? We buy the home and the house, and then we find a new owner for the home. And typically we do, if needed, we do like reparations and light refurbishment and improve the home if needed. And then we take care of the whole selling process. So through our partnerships.
So now I understand the vision has always been the same, but then he says, go nuts with AI on this process.
Yeah. So, this
in all corners.
Yeah. And so now kind of how this ties to the data science part and the machine learning parts. So to make this like a very core aspect of this is obviously to give a fair price and give a good, really good. So give the kind of highest possible offer to the customer so that they're happy about it and want to sell to us.
That is on the right side.
While still kind of maintaining the margins that we need to cover our costs to take over all the market risk and take over all the work with selling a house, right? And then we believe that what we can do is make like all the steps to sell a home. We can kind of, with the economy of scale, make it much more efficient. And then, for example, when we do refurbishments, we have much better prices negotiated with our contractors, right? And if we need to do that, and the deals with brokers to actually sell it, etc. But this is really just kind of the start of the journey. This is where we identify the biggest pain point is today, and why like kind of a blocker in the market. Like selling your home is such inconvenient and uncertain process. So if we can solve that by a digital, simple solution, I mean, it's a very good starting point. When we reach a bigger scale, obviously there's a lot of synergy, and if you buy and sell from us at the same time, then there's like not really even a need to maybe, I mean, if you exchange, you exchange your home for another Movesta home, right? And
so you can buy from Movesta as well?
Yeah, so that's exactly what. So our whole business model is that we then sell the home on the kind of open market today. We sell it to a new happy Movesta home owner, where we kind of made sure that everything is secure. There should be no risks in your home. It should be environmentally viable in terms of renovations, and it has this quality stamp from Movesta, and we sell the home for a new happy kind of family. That's one movie.
And all of a sudden now you become the matchmaker,
yeah,
and then you can complete the full cycle
exactly
from both ends, buyer and seller.
And at this stage, the business model is quite simple, right? We charge a fee like that we pay under the market, so we pay a bit under the market price, obviously, to cover our costs, and then our business model is that we make an upside on the transaction.
Yes, but you're taking the risk, so you should be paid for it. So.
Yeah, of course. And then we have, of course, also a lot of costs associated with selling it. Working with brokers and operational costs and kind of this. So it's taking away all these, solving it in a more scalable way for the.
But in the end, you could be the full service and the brokerage internal. I mean, like if you have the internal Movesta internal matchmaking market, you could keep that whole thing internal, I guess.
And also, I think kind of a lot of people are a bit fed up actually with how it currently works, how broker, like having to negotiate the price with the broker, knowing if you're ripped off or not, honestly, like, or if,
the whole bidding process.
The whole bidding process
the bidding process and how incentives are aligned or not with the broker and the seller properly, or like, it's.
And the Stockholm bidding process is nothing like this in the world almost.
Yeah. And in 10-20% of the cases, you actually end up, even when there is a winning bidder, then on the last day they withdraw, right? And there's no certainty at any point until you have a written contract. And then you really have to find a new home with the right timing, not having to take a big bridge loan or being out of somewhere to live for time. So we're trying to really solve this.
It's a broken process.
Yeah, it's a broken process, and it's, we believe, very fixable with this approach.
Good.
But then the challenges are to make this really scalable, because it's quite heavy on operations and on capital, etc. So we believe that truly kind of making as much as possible digitalized of all these steps that you need to go through.
Perhaps?
Perhaps
more digitalized. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's on my side.
Yeah, I don't know. Making the process kind of digital. Let's stay with that.
Yes.
And
still
also
use Hemnet, for example, I guess, to sell.
At the moment, yes, we put out homes on the regular listing sites, and we sell with regular authorized brokers that are partner brokers. Yeah. But as you said, along the road, there's other ways of kind of,
you can easily see what this could, with the scale. It's about scale, right?
It's about scale, and also we want to utilize kind of our data about the market and about sort of process automation to the extent possible to make this really kind of a scalable solution, to reduce our costs as much as possible, so that we can give as good offers as possible, so that in the end there's like a no-brainer. Like when of course now it is, you're sacrificing potentially getting 100K more. Like if you sell on the open market, obviously you can, if you're lucky, you can get a higher price, obviously. But selling to us, the closer we get to being able to offer the proper market price, the more obvious it should be. Like why go through this painful process?
But this now I'm getting curious, because I can just imagine several core AI or recommender type problems, optimization problems along the whole journey.
Yeah.
So which problems have you been starting with? Like the prediction was the obvious one, right?
Yeah. So exactly. So some of the, or rather maybe bigger the technical problems generally. One of them are pure like sanity things that we need, like proper integrations with the application form and just, our CRM system and a little bit of internal tooling for operations and for sales and sort of those basic things in place. But then what we spent a lot of time, probably half of my time is data collection to really gather. This is again, maybe first thing I would think about from my experience from Votti, like you really need a good data set to be able to develop.
Data collection to do a good enough prediction.
And this focused on the predictions. Yeah, exactly. Or the evaluation.
Prediction about the price that you buy it for.
The evaluation.
It can be very many different prediction problems here.
Of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we are talking about the valuation prediction as the number one problem.
Very much at this time, the most central problem is what we call the automatic valuation.
Which is fundamentally a data collection problem and then a valuation.
Yeah, so it's a
problem.
So it's a model. It's of course most reasonable to solve this with machine learning and AI or deep learning. But to do that, you need. It's set up. It's a super good supervised setting because constantly a lot of homes are coming out on the open market, on Hemnet, on broker sites, and then a month or two later they are sold.
So you have a supervised setup.
Yeah, and in Sweden it's an amazing starting point for us because compared to a lot of other countries in the world, we're extremely open about the selling prices.
Can you actually collect data from Hemnet and other places and use that for your own training purposes, or?
So I think everything that is, all these kind of ephemeral data that is temporarily up, available on the internet. So we use, a lot of different data sources. But collect whatever is like openly available, and this is scraping a lot, and also using stuff at Lantmäteriet, like when you for every home like villa and radhus that is sold, you actually by law kind of have to register the selling price with Lantmäteriet, and it's public data. Yeah. So yes, we're very open. This is for a startup in this sector, it's amazing to have this. So we have already, before I actually joined Movesta, that was kind of when I heard about the problem, I went back home and started to build a scraper. We need the best, we need like all data about the open market. So that is very much, and that's time consuming to build solid data collection software. We spent a lot of time so that data collection and then modeling on top of that. So that's been very much a core problem, but also just collecting and structuring this data has, even without the modeling, a lot of value for us at Movesta, because right now it's not a secret that it's very much a human in the loop. We have looking manually at each, like the scale we're currently operating, we can spend the time to really look at the specific case and do adjustments to the automatic valuation with like manual adjustments, but then just having accessible all the market data. So we have like internal tools to find good comparables. The traditional way of doing an home evaluation is to select a few comparables, the most similar homes that were recently sold, right? And then maybe do some manual adjustments. Maybe this one had a balcony, this one hadn't. Do some weights, and then you kind of average some sort of average compared to some comparables, and that's how you come up with but having really, really good information about these comparables. So did this home have a balcony or not? Was it on the top floor? Did it have a pool? That's very important. Even if you do the manual actual valuation, having high quality, easily achievable data is very important. So we have this gradual process where collecting the data, making it available internally to those in the company that actually places the offers, right? So it was the first step, even before at all having an automatic valuation model. And then the next step is start building the model, iterating on it, and start showing to the one actually placing the offer to a customer. This is what the model thinks. Here are some comparables. Then we can have the person.
So you show the comparables as well to the actual customer.
So right now it's pretty much of a manual process, as I said. But it's very important for us, I think, to set it in context, to explain. Most people. Maybe you go to Bool or somewhere, you can get from there are several services to get a rough valuation, but that's not with skin in the game. They can say this is roughly the value, but what does it really mean? In our case, we think your home is valued this, and we're prepared to pay you this amount. So it's quite a different setup, right, for the end customer. And when we do, it's important, I think, to explain why we believe this is the market value. So that's
I think you brought out so many interesting topics here that I also personally like a lot, which is human in a loop, for one, to actually augment humans with AI rather. And then secondly, to actually build trust at the customer by using explainable prediction or model interpretability, so to speak. But before we go into those, I know you probably have some IP and you can't divulge, all the details, how the model work and how we come up with evaluation. But can you give some rough description of how the system works to come up with evaluation? What kind of data, what kind of model, or can you share something about that?
Yeah.
And if you can't share, just say that. That's
sure.
okay as well.
No, I can definitely. I mean, I can't go into the exact details of how we do it, obviously, but so we are collecting very detailed information about everything that's sold on the open market. That's really the foundation. That's the data set. And the nice setting for this is that we constantly get like a new test set. Every month there is new things sold.
But you get tabular data about the type of
the apartment. So I mean, that's an example. I mean, everything you would find on Hemnet or a broker site, like the basic features. What floors? If it's an apartment, how large is your plot or your garden?
Do you use images as well? Or?
We have a lot of image data, and you have all the basic. The features that are, I mean, maybe that's as specific as I can go, but that's openly available while a home is on sale. Yeah. And then you can augment that with a lot of complementary data sources, right? You can use geodata, you can use demographic data to kind of augment. I mean, you think of this feature vector for a certain listing or a certain home that's up for sale. And then you can, augment it with what's the distance to the closest school, or I mean, you can find a lot of ways to kind of augment these core features about the home. So you have kind of the structural things, or the address, exactly where it's located, what kind of roof is it, like a lot of structure things about the home, and then kind of the situational things, how close is it to the water, to other things, and then maybe appeal things.
We actually in Peltorian had a project like
I
this.
know.
Right? And we had this type of data called LOI, or I think it was location of interest or something instead for, right? Which is what you said, basically, how close this to a swimming pool or Systembolaget apparently is important. So a subway or something like that.
So you can turn it into, I mean, and there is a few options. Then you can do the regular kind of, the very vanilla kind of, if you transform each home to a feature vector, and then you can apply any of the regular supervised learning algorithms. I mean, of course, we started out just doing some basic feature engineering, normalizing this data in a reasonable way, and then applying, I mean, gradient boosted trees, something that's typically something that performs quite well from scratch, right? And then that works quite okay. If you have good data, you get reasonable predictions out of it. But there's a few challenges with that. One is that obviously it's a very shifting. I mean, the kind of distribution shifts constantly in this kind of time series, or this flow of new information.
So you have a trend.
So you have trends, a lot of trends, both very local ones, right? This area is up and coming. There's right now a lot of demand for this specific, and that's hard to model properly in a way when you have you turn it into tabular data problem, right? You need to do very frequent retraining of the model, and you basically need to somehow make sure that model emphasizes recent samples more than previous ones. But if you're training on 2 years of history of data with a regular setup, it will pay equal attention to perform well on kind of the old data and the new data. So it's quite challenging to, I mean, this, I would say, I guess, parametric model or non-instance based model, like this tabular kind of feed forward, or I mean supervised setup. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the very kind of instant based model, like the nearest neighbors algorithm, where it's essentially the traditional way, where you just take the most simplest possible solution is you take some distance measure, where you you use the square meters, the longitude and latitude, and a few other features, and then you find the nearest neighbors. So which are the top 5 or 10 items that are similar to this one that were sold recently, and then you take the average of that as the price. I mean, that's the very
that's also like explainably nice.
It's very nice for interpretability, and it's kind of automatically handles the constant shifts in trends in the data, because only thing you need to do is maintain a database of everything that's sold, right? So when there's a new property, you collect the nearest neighbors. That's, of course, the time ago they were sold is one of the more important features to do the neighbor.
What about seasonality, before and after the summer and stuff like that? Is that something you...
It's an interesting... So there are a lot of trends. So definitely for us, I mean, any aspect of forecasting is always there, because when we evaluate it, there will be some time until we sell it, right? So it's not only about guessing about what the price is right now. It's to some extent kind of forecasting. Is there a risk that is very volatile, that kind of the trends in this area are not, that we need to weigh in kind of the offer that we make to cover the kind of the market risk that we take. But in our case, it's much less so than for other. I mean, if you're buying a home to invest in it, to own it over several years or something, then you're very interested in kind of the long-term development. In our case, it's really core in our business model that we own it as short time as possible.
Right.
I mean, partly because of, we want to provide, liquidity to the market and solve these knots that I mentioned. So we have no intention in like owning homes and speculating in their value. So we really just wanted to find new owner as soon as possible. And also kind of for our unit economics, it's really important that, we lock up a lot of capital while we own the home. So the quicker we can turn around the same capital, the shorter we own the home, the better for the unit economics of each transaction that we make. So for that reason, kind of the forecasting aspect is not something that we've focused so much on. It's definitely there, and it can be, maybe I'll get to that, by kind of the right model setup, you can kind of automatically model some of these trends aspects as well. So getting back to your questions on how we do it, I mentioned earlier in the initial discussion that we made a bit of a push, we had tried these kind of separate approaches and kind of maybe combine them a little bit towards more of an end-to-end approach where you really combine the benefits of the instant-based learning, kind of the nearest neighbors approach, combined with the power of supervised learning, using deep learning with a supervised setup where you can really tune, and then you want to kind of tune this end-to-end ultimately. And
people may not be familiar with the term instance-based learning, but can you perhaps compare or describe that to traditional parameter model-based learning?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the right definition, but I think typically you talk about in traditional statistics about parametric and non-parametric models or learning, and machine learning. I think the school book example of a instant-based or non-parametric model, if I get it correct, is basically k-nearest neighbors. Yeah. So and the kind of why it's instant-based and non-parametric is that kind of the size of your model grows with your data set. So when you collect more data, the bigger your data set is, you're just about finding other instances, right? That's instance-based. You find explicitly other samples that are similar.
Well, support vectors, like support vector machines.
Exactly. That's true. Yeah, it's also, and when kind of the size of the model grows with the more data you have to, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have the non-instant based or the fully kind of parametric model, which is, I think, linear regression is maybe the simplest example of that, where you decide that your model is going to be, you decide kind of what features you use. You have these 20 numerical features, and it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 samples or 1,000,000 samples, your model is going to have the same size, right? It have its 20 weights, it's 20 parameters. So it's a parametric model, and it doesn't grow. It doesn't explicitly look at other samples. It learns from the average of all samples, kind of what weights to learn. But these are very different, and they, are often combined in various ways. But what we try to do is kind of, so if you want to phrase it, so it's every home is sold in a context, right? There is some, and the context is the market. Like everything else has been sold in a somewhat meaningful region. So some geographical space and space and time. That's kind of your input. So can you learn to kind of just, here's your target home, here's the whole kind of market chunk of market that is relevant to predict the price, and then you let the model both figure out which to compare to, like which are the relevant comparison. You let the model learn that rather than fixing a distance metric in the k-nearest neighbors, right? You have to decide on your space to do the distance metric. Here you leave it to the model to figure out which are the kind of comparables that we should use, and maybe it's like a scale. Maybe there should be hundreds of them that are used, but only a few are. 100 of them tells a lot of the story of kind of the general trends, but maybe 4 of them are very, very crucial to really set.
Weighted average in some
case. So you try to learn both the end-to-end, try to learn the distance, how to find comparables and how to weigh them. But you do it rather than kind of taking the explicit steps. You try to do it, and it's pretty much like a sequential attention problem in that sense. So there's a lot of recent progress in NLP and other areas where you can really apply similar.
Where does the sequence come in here? Is it like
so when you're looking at what is this home worth if you would try to put this home in the market today? The sequence is the chronology of things that happens on the market. So the past half year, you have, I mean, you can put every sale in a sequence, right? But because you also have the distance of, I mean, what happens in Gothenburg is maybe not that relevant to Stockholm.
So sequence is a trend for each area in some way, or trend for each type of apartment, or what?
Yeah. So you can, I mean, you have, if you transform each home to some feature space, I mean, some vector describing that home, all this basic information about this home. Then if you can have a set of that, right? You can have maybe you have some heuristic metric saying like this commune with some reasonable limits on, and then you maybe find that the last year there were 160 homes. This is your context, and all of them represented by one vector. Then you can find out ways to feed this to the model. So your input is this. I mean, you can think of it as a sequence. You can just put them in chronological order. When were they sold? Like some subset of the data, and then kind of your last row is kind of this home. Given whatever happened in this kind of chunk of the market throughout the last year, what's the expected outcome for this home if we put it on the market now? So we try to do that, and we're heavily rely on kind of recent state-of-the-art deep learning for
like what?
Yeah, we tried several different approaches, but I think the kind of transformer-based models are very well suited for specifically doing this, like looking at the chunk of information. It's not really constrained by the sequence. I mean, it can, like a recurrent neural network, whatever is next to each other is very relevant because that's what's closest in kind of the computational, the information flow in a recurrent network. And in an intelligent network, you can really learn to kind of look at. So that's a very, very interesting area for us.
And you said before, actually, this was before the pod started, that you've been basically really driving a sprint, going really hard a couple of weeks to work and lift part of the platform on some areas.
Yeah, so as I said, we were getting quite reasonable performance out of this more vanilla approaches, but I think I had a vision kind of when I started. I think during the first week or two when I started thinking about the problem early on, I thought this is a really exciting modeling problem. Like how do you set up the problem to learn it with deep learning end to end to perform on the task of evaluating homes, right? It's like when technically I felt it was a really inspiring problem. So already then I think I started building up this kind
hypothesis.
Hypothesis, like probably this must be the ultimate way. I mean, I have quite strong, for good and bad, intuition. Like I trust my intuition, but sometimes I'm completely wrong. Sometimes you're right. I mean, so I started building up this, and I mentioned it a few times to my co-founders, like at some point we're going to do this. It's going to be amazing. And I started, of course, talking to my technical colleagues in the tech team. And now we should have decided that. So if we go back to the parametric or the kind of gradient boosted tree approach, where you have just this regular tabular data set, to make that perform, you need to do a lot of kind of feature engineering still. If you want to encapsulate or represent trends, maybe you need to do some rolling windows of trends and augment each vector, like to help the model to figure out context about each. So we felt that this is not very scalable. Like we need to decide kind of what rolling window trends we need to add, and it's a simple way to get started, and it's simple because then you can just scikit-learn, fit, predict, and it just gives you, and you can do hyperparameter search and you get some result. But we realized that we want to get away from as much as possible from the feature engineering and apply deep learning end to end. So I had this idea for a very long time, and then we decided like now, rather than wasting time, if this idea flies, it's probably much more scalable and can have a much more optimal. It should be able to, in theory, perform much better than the other approaches. But it's also validate. It's also challenging. So there's a lot of engineering challenges in making this model work. So it's a risk. I mean, we might spend weeks to even be on par with the previous model, or we might have bugs. So I mean, it's more of a complex engineering problem to some extent. But once it's built, it allows for much simple iterations and leaving more of the learning to the actual model, which I am very always keen to do, like making sure that.
So let's cut to the chase. So what the lift is to transformers, or what is the lift that you've been really working on?
I would say this to do this letting end-to-end learn, both to figure out how to giving it. I mean, the way I can phrase it is basically that giving it a big chunk of data, some representation of the market, together with the representation of the features for the target or for the target,
and do it in one loop,
and let it kind of figure out by end-to-end learning how to do all these steps, like to compare and to weight and on its own, leave that to the deep learning algorithm with deep learning architecture.
Cool.
So that we did that, but it requires a lot of kind of still a few to always has to achieve that data, to achieve the kind of just data structures to feed the model as input and the targets. It requires quite a bit of massaging of the data. Which is just, I mean, it's quite it's very clear and doable, but it's just kind of a bit of engineering. So that's what we did.
Are you out of the cave, or are you still in the cave?
No, we're out of the cave because we, I mean, so really it's kind of insane, you know, thousands and thousands of lines of hacking for 2-3 weeks.
3 weeks of hacking.
Yeah, or
how many lines of code?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a poor way of describing how much you.
I know,
but it's a lot of code, and then. Yes, eventually seeing that, you know, it's already without much tuning, it's definitely better than the previous podcast.
So you feel we talked about this when you go in and really now I do a full-on sprint. Yeah, it can be very satisfying, or it could be, oh my god. Yeah, it turned out to be satisfying. I hope
it turned out to be very satisfying because then we're in a much better position, more exciting position to continue to improve it. Now it's actually easier to try out.
So intuition was where it should be.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think so, and I'm very happy. But I mean, still, you should question. I mean, is there even still completely different ways that could even be better? I don't know, but we're very happy, and we already put the old version kind of in the trash, and we have the new one.
So this is a new.
Running.
It becomes a new process. I mean, like you have now stringed it together in a different way. You needed to rethink the process.
Yeah,
and recode it.
And it's nice that it's kind of already stably better than what we had before. Without, I mean, there's loads of low-hanging fruits still to do that. Like now, it's the core of it is there, but now there's loads of improvements.
And already, you know you're on the right path. That's fun. That's a good feeling.
We're on a good path, at least because it's performing. Yeah, for sure.
I think you mentioned before, Anders, to compare perhaps traditional feature engineering work, which you have to do, of course, a lot, to more. I'm not sure what to call it, target or loss or objective engineering in some way. What did you really mean with that?
Yeah, I think it's one of my käpphästar, what's it called?
Pet peeves.
Pet peeves, yeah. That I think a lot of the recent breakthroughs, or like kind of the whole shift from, you know, pre deep learning and into deep learning is, I mean, before deep learning, there was a lot of focus on engineering the right feature space so that it becomes kind of linearly separable, or you can, I mean, especially for images where deep learning first had the first breakthroughs, that, you know, finding these really, really weird engineered feature spaces to make something from versus actually just feeding the raw data, right? And that's extremely powerful and promising. And for some tasks, it's enough to kind of figure out that you have this gradient descent algorithm, this specific architecture, like convolutional networks had very nicely inductive biases built in the architecture, the way that the invariances that it promotes. And that just, with enough big data set, turned out to be really kind of enough to crack kind of image labeling, right? But then for a lot of other tasks, I think a lot of the progress that we've seen is that, I mean, I guess you can take it down to deep learning is not, of course, guaranteed to find you like an optimal minima, right? Or an optimal solution. It finds some solution that whatever kind of, I mean, I think of it as this very noisy environment where you do batch gradient descent, and you some extremely weird parameter space of like million parameter models. And will it actually convert to something useful? And to achieve that, I think that rather than kind of do feature engineering, you need to do what I call target engineering. You need to design a task and an objective, a loss function that sort of makes this weird space where you try to find the minima smooth towards what you're trying to achieve. So you know that you can get stuck. I mean, there's nothing that tells you that in theory, a given architecture with a given set of weights could solve a certain problem in theory, but you don't know. I mean, you just have to test and see if with gradient descent we can reach a minima that's satisfying, right? But by kind of, I think it's shifted. I think the skills and the kind of the skill of working with deep learning is kind of now understanding. I should give you some examples. This is very abstract, but take for example, I think one of the early examples is just, you know, denoising autoencoders. So rather than if you just try to classify the feed-forward network and had an input vector and the target, and you had not too much data, by just training it supervised, you could get X performance. But then you realized if you actually try to make it like, how can we? So the idea is really to build this gradual internal representations that are very good at generalizing the representation that really sort of models the data in a good way. That's what deep learning is really good at when it is working well. So
representation learning,
exactly. And then if you do the noising autoencoders with the same amount of data, you could actually, then you have a much richer task. So the noising autoencoder is basically, I mask a few of these features. So in the home, let's say the automatic validation model, you have a home and you mask out the square meters and the selling price and the longitude or whatever. And then you ask it to reconstruct it. So this sort of forces the model to figure out, I mean, there's more things to do to achieve it. If you just give it the selling price, then it's kind of the gradients, the optimization surface that's created from that forces it to some minimum. But by doing the pre-training of a more kind of a more rich task, you can achieve better representation, and then you fine-tune it on your end task, and then you achieve much better performance on the same amount of data.
I love this, and I'm sure Jan LeCun would love this as well. This is basically self-supervised learning,
and right? I think that's even better. I mean, now with NLP, doing the self-supervised learning, I mean, maybe your end goal is doing the sentiment analysis. This piece of text, is it I mean, positive or negative for IMDb reviews or something? If you just train on that supervised learning task, throw a really deep 12-layer BERT architecture on it. I mean, it doesn't learn any meaningful representations because it's too poor. I mean, it converges to something that is maybe on par and quite close, but by doing this self-supervised learning, by, in BERT case, masking out random words, you're forcing it to really model language, right? As opposed to just you first need to understand language to be able to predict sentiment. So that's kind of what by this target engineering, loss engineering, task engineering, with the same architecture, the same kind of structural inductive biases in your model, but by quite different loss function and task. And you learn embeddings.
It's like two positive side effects, I would say, of that. One is what we say, you basically learn a better representation, understanding what it means. But secondly, you don't need to have annotated data as well to do it. Of course,
in text, right? It's also by doing this huge amount of data.
Is it also in your case? I mean, if you just mask out the size of the apartment, I mean, you don't need to have annotations to learn to predict that, right?
So in our case, you have the same. So we have limited data. I mean, we've collected high quality data for some time. You can have less qualitative data way back in history that you can access, but it's still like, it's not the infinite amount of data. It's not where NLP like self-super. So that's what we're exploring now. Basically, how can you, with this limited amount of data, how can you squeeze out a lot more performance? And then I really believe in, like in our case, yes, you could, for example, rather than just trying to predict selling prices of target homes, try to do the masking approach. Some of these, there's a lot of these
first
techniques.
Learn to represent
the data, and then fine tune it towards your end task. But that's a very exciting area. Where I think,
but for someone who doesn't follow the last 10 minutes,
sorry.
No, it's okay. What I really hear is that we are now in our philosophy of how to code and how to think. We are moving to the next step, and we have talked about how good it is with self-supervised learning, and we don't need to annotate. But the way you're approaching the target now is that you try to flip how to think from feature engineering to, let's say, target engineering.
Yeah.
So can you explain that what's the difference in thinking, in other words, that are even more, that you don't need to be a data scientist to understand? What is the difference in thinking? I think the example, you try to do an example, but there is a difference in thinking here, how you approach the problem from feature engineering to target engineering. I get that.
Yeah, I think
trying to understand it better.
I see it. I think it is pretty technical effect of, the fact that deep learning, now it's still very technical, but that stems from that deep learning models are very good at, they can operate directly on raw kind of pixel data, raw time series data. But there's no guarantee that they will. Okay, so maybe I'll put it this way. I think deep learning models are very good at perception. If there is a direct kind of, this is the image, is there a cat in it? Like you need to figure out just kind of you need to extract some, and this is like fur, fur pixels. This is kind of the shapes. So it's kind of perception, right? And the same with maybe voice speech recognition is kind of a problem of perception. Even mainly so for images. Whereas if you look at like puzzle solving, to solve a Rubik's cube, that's much more, that takes, a lot of sequential steps. It's a puzzle. It's something that, and to achieve that, deep learning out of the box is not very good at that. But so it's if there is a long, complex journey from the input kind of task, if I give you some representation of a Rubik's cube state, and I ask a deep learning model to spit out the sequence of instructions to solve this Rubik's cube, right? Then the loss surface is insane. Like there's no way that it can generalize, right? You can basically generate infinite data for this because it's a closed problem. So then you really need to find a way to guide the learning of the network to kind of do the stepwise. It's very technical, but I think that's.
But let me try to explain what you guys are talking about here, because the way I hear you talking is that we have a history of how we have learned how to code, right? And then we come into machine learning and the sort of evolution of machine learning, and we have all learned and been taught that we have done to do feature engineering. So that is part of what you're trained and what you're educated to do. And then we move into more and more advanced new types of AI, deep learning. And when you are going deeper and deeper and deeper down into how the actual deep learning neural network works, you realize that, okay, the quality of a deep learning neural network with its attention or its perception actually means that the feature engineering way, which might be relevant for the other type of machine learning problems, are less relevant than actually the target type engineering. It's like you're getting closer and closer in deeper understanding of what deep learning type coding is all about. So then you start switching your focus that is more in sync or in tune or relevant for the deep learning problem. Would that be a? So it seems to me like as you guys are quite long way down the deep learning. You love it. This is
rabbit hole. Yeah.
This is your rabbit hole, right? And when you come to a certain level of the rabbit hole, it's like, okay, your understanding for the deep learning mechanisms means, well, you start thinking target engineering. You start thinking not feature engineering anymore. That's what I picked up in this conversation.
I think we can split it up in two, because the second point you brought up with more reasoning or the perception versus more reasoning, as I would call at least, type of thinking is like puzzle solving, for example, and Rubik's Cube kind of problems. I think it's potentially a bit different topic. You can argue me on this if you want to, but if we just try to finish the first point, which is the target engineering or the more self-supervised one, I think it's so profound in some way.
This is it.
How it's not too many people just think, okay, we just want to predict this. But in reality, with deep learning, if you compare deep learning to traditional machine learning is about just predicting the thing. Whereas deep learning actually also automate the process of representing the data, going from raw data to some kind of representation, and then using that representation to do the end task, the end prediction that you want to do. But if you skip that part about properly learning the representation, you will not get it working that well. And I think that is more or less, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying.
I think the intuition the way I think of it is that, your loss function is the kind of the feedback you give to the network, right? And you, by every batch, you ask it to spit out something and you tell it if it was right or wrong. And this is a very, very weak signal, right? If your task was to kind of, I don't know, put an olive on the top of the fan here, and you were just trying out things, and I was just going to say, are you right or wrong? And it would like so many things for you to try out in this room, because you have no idea what I'm asking you to do initially. That's how I think of a network, right? But every time you try, you do something. You spit out something. I tell you no, we do a little bit closer to this. But I think if you that's a bad example, but the way the richer feedback you can put back, the richer feedback you can give encoding the gradients when you train your network, the more likely it is that it kind of finds good representations. So that's kind of my intuition. It's very technical, but that's my intuition.
No, but now it becomes more and more clear to me what we're talking about. It's simply to recognize the differences in techniques and deep neural networks being its own technique. On a deeper level, you need to understand the problem and work on other topics are becoming more important, right? Yeah. So you are paying attention to the early part of the representation. It's super important to get the performance out of it. So basically, you are switching your attention to how you look at the problem because that's what you need to do to get performant deep learning. It's that simple that just because you've done machine learning, you still need to learn the ins and outs of deep learning to understand where to pay attention.
And I think it's such a flexible algorithm. So there's a lot of creative ways to achieve this. I think another good example is some of the, I guess it was OpenAI, some reinforcement learning algorithms where you're trying to just play Doom, one of these first-person shooter. And in a reinforcement learning setting, there's even a bigger dilution of the feedback because you have to do a whole sequence of actions and you just told them, did you get closer or further away from kind of the end goal? So there's a very weak kind of guiding signal. And when you try to do that with deep learning from pixels on the screen, they figured out that if you also try to predict, obviously part of this puzzle is figuring out the 3D world, right? So the end goal is just, did you survive or did you die? That's the feedback signal, 1 or 0. But to be able to navigate in this maze, you need to first figure out what's even these pixels, what do they even mean? And then they also did this self-supervised. They basically asked the model to predict the next 5 frames or so, which is completely, it's not at all, the end goal is to kind of win. It's off topic. It's you're trying to...
It's off topic, but it makes you more performant.
It forces, and it's the same network taking the actions, navigating in the maze that you previously were just spitting out actions and you told it, did you get closer, further away from the goal? But now you force it to predict the next pixels, which is just an auxiliary kind of extra task. And that just went from 0 performance to good performance because it's a
you need to understand the world before you can do predictions.
The neural network needs to, the point is the neural network needs to understand the world to perform. So it's a different type of engineering.
And to tie it back to maybe
so you need to code how to understand the world. Now I can be performant.
And to tie it back to classical machine learning, I think previously, of course, you tried to impose your understanding of the problem and you would split it up in sub-problems. But then you would have to first create one program or algorithm that did the first part, that tried to that was your 3D engine that tried to predict from some pixels what the map was. And then you had another algorithm taking that as input, trying to navigate it. So you had these all modules stacked on top of each other. And in the end, maybe you made it kind of work, but then you were had no way of end-to-end optimize it. So the difference is with deep learning, you can try to use the same core representation or the same core algorithm to do all the subtasks. And once you solve them one by one, you can still fine tune it end to end, which allows for much better end results. Yeah. Because you have all these glitches in your engineering. If you solve it step by step, there's going to be this bottlenecks of information that doesn't propagate.
And now we had a goosebump moment, because, so that's and the goosebump moment was, this was your re-engineering task that you did with Movesta. Instead of having many steps, you basically built the end-to-end. So now you can work on the whole thing.
But you can't just trust it to figure out the journey. You still have to do this loss engineering and guide it along the way so that the model.
But the hypothesis, what you're trying to do is this.
Yeah, pretty much. So.
Cool. And I would like to move into the other topic you mentioned, which was the puzzle solving kind of problem. And it's much more philosophical, I would say. I'm not sure if you can connect that to Movesta in some way or if you have some use for that there. But let me just try to frame the problem a bit and see if you agree with this context or if you actually mean something else. But for me, what you said, at least, it's the perception versus reasoning kind of dilemma.
Yeah, for sure.
And, Francois Chollet is one of, pioneers in deep learning and, he wrote Keras and is a philosopher and Google engineer and whatnot.
Met him once in San Francisco, actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
The Google campus.
Oh, nice. He also spoke recently in some podcast, I think Machine Learning Street Talk podcast or something. And he spoke about the difference between more discrete problems and continuous problems. Yeah. And the smooth, lost surface, you spoke about that as well. You need to have a target that is kind of a smooth landscape. Otherwise it will be hard to at least use gradient descent to navigate through that landscape. And here I think he gave some examples, like deep learning would be horrible in trying to predict the next digit in pi, for example. But it would be very easy to write a computer program that can do that extremely efficiently. But to train a deep learning network to do it, it would be hard. And
a waste of resources, for sure. A waste of resources, for sure.
That as well. Yes. So then I actually do not like that much the way he phrased, discrete problems. I think discrete problems is not a problem. I mean NLP is discrete in some sense, but I still see what he means. Some type of problems is hard to define a smooth loss landscape for, if you see what I mean, right?
Maybe if you phrase it that there is a very abstract connection between the observation and the actual underlying mechanism that got this. So in the pi case, I mean, there's a very abstract idea what pi as a number means, but kind of the sequence of digits has no obvious way of resembling the meaning of kind of pi, right? So that's why it's kind of very, what the network sees is kind of the observation.
Wouldn't it be fun to try to train a transformer to try to predict the next letter or digit of pi?
Yeah, but there's just one sample of each. I mean, of course it can memorize it if you just train it, but there's no.
But I don't think it would work. I mean,
so let's say this. I don't think you would. I mean, you can learn it to memorize the training data. But then predict the next. No, I mean it's. You should never. I mean, I wouldn't say for sure, but it seems like completely crazy to try to do that, and unlikely. It would generalize for the next digits, kind of.
How does it go back to the puzzle solving? Because
I mean, the puzzle solver is the same thing, I guess, as
discrete,
like the next type of digit in pi or something. Some tasks are about, they're easy to define if you use rule-based systems. I mean, it's kind of easy to write them.
But maybe instead of kind of discrete and continuous, I think any problem, as I phrased it, that requires a sequence of steps. There's an algorithm. You need to understand that you need to do this.
But still, reinforcement learning is also a sequence of steps and actions. So
but that makes it much more challenging. That requires a lot more clever tricks to make deep learning work. But you can make it work if you apply the clever tricks along the way, kind of. But I think that's definitely the more of a program something is. To solve something, you need to execute a program of several kind of sequence of computations. Then it gets harder and harder to apply vanilla kind of deep learning. You have to do a lot of that's my thinking.
And there are these kind of other type of challenges, that try to have this kind of marriage between symbolic AI and more machine learning AI. And also, it's called type 1 or type 2 type of system, or thinking fast and slow, and all these kind of books that have been coming out. So many different terms about this problem, I think. What's your view on, let's take a more concrete example, like driving a car. We can think about driving a car could be solved by perception to a large extent.
A very big part of the problem, I guess. But
but at some point, if you have to decide, I'm going to drive over a dog or a person or whatever kind of decision you have to make, you have to do some kind of reasoning, which potentially is hard to do from a perception point of view. What do you think? What would be your preferred solution to have a ethically, morally acceptable self-driving car that kills the right?
The ethical aspect is one. I mean, first of all, just from kind of plain engineering point of view, I think I would still like to be in control of my modules here. I mean, I would like to have a lot of checkpoints in this system where I can really assess what's happening to be able to kind of...
So interpretable
at least interpretable, and maybe even kind of explicitly rule-based at some steps, right? So that would just be I would guess that you want, that is the reason not to have it end-to-end for that reason. But then that's a bit contradictory to what I just said. To really make it work the best way possible, I still believe that kind of an end-to-end optimized solution will be more performant. So that's just one aspect. That's just, maybe too many steps of this program to run a car that I would maybe like to be in control of them initially, and then maybe gradually try to merge them together into more end-to-end thought. And then, as you really point out in the ethical aspects also. It's I think there's so many other. It's whether it's kind of end-to-end or not. How I think you will be able to explain this part. I mean, kind of you must be able to, for kind of legislation makers and for the public interest, I think you have to be able to.
But do you think rule-based systems is the only way to explain things, or do you think explainable deep learning models is the way to go as well?
I think there will be increased acceptance the more applied similar scenarios when apply. I think there is, if with sufficient interpretability, it doesn't have to be rule based. If you can just sort of statistically just show that this is the learned way.
That's what you do in Movesta, right? I mean, you use these kind of instance-based approaches to show, or at least explain by showing examples. Right?
Yeah, of course, it's a bit less on stake in that sense. If it goes wrong, I mean, you didn't get the market price, but it goes wrong in subprime cars. But exactly, you can still say that you can explain the underlying data that was used, and you don't have to explain exactly. Well, the algorithm said that this was a comparable, but it's worth 10% more because of exactly these factors. I mean, maybe you couldn't even say it because you don't have that level of, but you can still simulate and say that this property, yes, you see maybe on Hemnet historical sales that there was one close to you that sold for 200K more. Right. And we can explain to you that that property had a pool. I mean, that's valuable because you can even try in the model. If we would add the pool to your feature vector, it would show it. I mean, so you can, there's loads of different ways to make interpretability.
That's a good way to think about explainability, that you also add things in to see, if you have that, then you would have also got the loan.
And if you do the simile, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a tired example, but this mom with a baby in a buggy. So if you can really show the system, like in this case, it would decide to hit this person instead of this person. But if we simulate and put the baby buggy at this person, it will always choose the other one. So I mean, it's like, then at least if you can show that is the behavior with enough kind of statistics to show that, then maybe it's enough to say that this is the encoded behavior rather than that it was explicitly designed by rule to do that. I mean, then it's an implicit rule.
But
so I don't know.
If I compare to like going to a manual broker and I want to sell my apartment, and then I ask him, the broker, why do you set this valuation to it? And he says, I think this is, given my experience, I think this. If I instead can go to Movesta and say, here are a number of examples very similar to your apartment, and this is the reason why we think the valuation should be like this.
This is
really good. I think good user experience to have this kind of explainability, right?
Yeah, it is. And for us, it's important. I mean, for things like since we do some refurbishments, for example, should we install a wine fridge in this home? How much does that increase the value? If we have data on, does wine fridge add 3 times its value or half its value? Is it worth? I mean, that's a silly example, but like how much when it comes to doing improvements, I think you can really utilize interpretability.
I see the time is flying away.
But a last point on this, because taking home this whole topic of explainability, maybe so everybody is with us here, because I think also now there is a big topic on ethical AI and explainable AI, and all the reports coming out of both the EU framework now and DIG and all that. They talk about this, the European way is about explainable AI. No. But what people,
trustworthy AI.
Trustworthy AI. And I think the topic is that you can reach, I think this is a very nice example how you reach trustworthy AI that I trust, and that it's explained to me on a human level, so I can, in a reasoning way, understand why my price is this. That's not the same that you can explain exactly the code, right? And I think that's what people go wrong here when they think, I can't see, exactly how the neural network, what nodes it went through. It's completely stupid because you can work around that problem, like Movesta has solved the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you can, if you're, for example, interested in is the risk of discrimination in like the typical case of who you give a mortgage or something. I mean, I think most cases you can design a query to test it. But then the problem is if this is proprietary and who has the access, who is allowed to construct this query. If you're a bank giving out mortgages, then this is your proprietary technology. So I think the challenge is not kind of that you're using deep learning. The challenge is how can you expose this for someone external to verify I think it's more of a kind of.
But I think this is a solvable problem. It's just that you need to focus the attention of the discussion and the debate on okay, what's the real end game? You want explainable, trustworthy for a human in a reasoned point of view. And if we are human to human, how would you do it? We would do it like this. I would show examples like this. Okay, so if we do that, I think this is explainable AI.
Yeah, and I think it's much more explainable than human decisions. Most of the
exactly.
I'm absolutely sure that there's loads of these issues everywhere. I mean, that discriminative aspect, that it doesn't take into account certain types of population, etc. I mean, there are there
and
for
the
sure.
AI should be studied.
But now at least we can prove it, because if we have a consistent way of doing it, an algorithm, then you can prove that this bias exists, right? The discrimination exists. Before, when you had random people sitting making decisions, then you would exchange the people, and you would still have the same prejudices and biases, but it's much harder to prove. So I'm very much in the camp of, that this will actually be...
Yeah, because the argument is so screwed. I mean, like, it's completely crazy how we basically start, like you usually say, you go on a red light and you get a fine because you're driving a Volvo. That's your favorite explanation of, trying to regulate the AI instead of the usage or something like this. And what I'm saying here is like, we are getting into the wrong debate. Of course, we need to have ethical and unbiased AI, but of course we should have higher standards for the AI and for the human people. But the underlying problem is so much bigger.
But I guess
what is the process today?
Yeah, and a slightly different aspect of it is obviously the scalability. The fact that the same algorithm or the same company can have such a huge impact makes it more urgent. Yeah. So I think that's where it's kind of really kind of the ethical aspects and the challenges with the AI divide, etc. I think that the fact that essentially just centralization of power, right? Centralization of for a specific company or specific product has such huge impact. That in itself causes a lot of challenges. Then all the things with regulation, like how should you regulate who is allowed to say what on Twitter, or all these questions around when an algorithm gets such huge impact on the public debate, etc. That raises that's rather because of the scalability of the technology than the fact if it's interpretable or not. That's ethical concerns, because a single company's algorithm can have such huge impact on kind of...
Yeah, but then the regulation is more about monopoly and AI...
But it's very tight, strictly tied. The reason that it's kind of... AI is kind of the reason that this is possible.
But the problem is now with the EU regulation, the people who are further away in the AI divide than the giants will come even further away. So we want to tackle the problem of scalability, but it's hitting what is the scale is that one company has all this power. That is in one way the problem.
It's something new. It's something slightly new, not that new maybe, but it needs to be dealt with in some way, I think.
But I think I'm scared that we are not helping us to playing. I think the level playing field is better for inclusion and diversity and solving AI problems than some of the bias problems that we are trying to take away. I think we're making some of these problems bigger than they are. Actually, we are creating a bigger problem somewhere else in the AI divide than the bias problem. I don't know how to say it, but I'm a little bit like, the debate is good. We need to regulate it, but we sometimes it's like we are missing. We are missing. How do you say it? We are missing the big elephant in the room and shooting on mosquitoes. I don't know how to phrase it.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say
it's a tricky question, I think. But
I think it is, from a legislation point of view, like extremely tricky, and I'm maybe not enough up to speed with exactly that. I don't really feel that I can comment too much on like if we're on the right track or not, to be honest. But it is challenging. I think it makes sense to invest in these areas, like invest in legislation, invest in researching ethical AI, etc. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I have a hard time saying if we're on the right track or not, honestly. Some people are.
Just to comment on that, I think some way to summarize what to say is we always have to consider the opportunity cost.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
So if you don't use AI, what we will lose, how many more people will be killed in traffic if you don't have self-driving cars that work well? How many people will die in hospital and die of COVID and whatnot if we don't make use of data and AI properly?
Yeah.
And I mean, you always have to balance the good with the bad in some way. I think that's important.
I think that's the bottom line.
And just to have a final question, perhaps, and I'm thinking more future head of Movesta as well, potentially. And actually, I'm getting eager because I thinking about selling my apartments as well, and thinking about trying it out. But if I were to do that, I would like to have answers to 2 questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One is, I imagine that since you are basically becoming experts in buying and selling houses and apartments, you should be able to, for one, buy and sell at a higher price than most, private people. Like, normal people like me, I have no experience in doing this. I will probably do a lot of errors in my way of, for one, selling or buying stuff. So in short, you should have the experience of optimizing the price, both when it comes to buying and selling.
Yeah.
Have you done any evaluation of that? Could you simply take, like, here are people that didn't make use of Movesta. Here are people that did. Here is a similar type of flat. And when they did not use Movesta, they got this money for it. When they did use it, they got this money, and see some kind of percentage uplift or something
from that we are the ones selling it, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit hard since for a large fraction of the homes, we actually do invest quite a lot. I mean, like in fixing it up, refurbishing it, so that it's like ready to move in for the people. And that is always...
It's hard to compare because otherwise it's a private person that do the investment, and now you have to do the investment.
We have to do investment, and so that's where we can do a lot of increase our margins because we can optimize that process. We have the negotiations with the contractors already in place. We know how to execute this operationally. So it's a good way for us, but it's not intended to be the core of our business. The core of our business is to unlock this, not of the complexity of buying and selling. So it's not, but that is one easy way to add value, to create value. We can do that. And that's like gives really positive unit economics for us now. But then we want to, I
think in short, if you were to show that, given, of course, you need to have a margin on things, and of course you need to find, like, buy it as cheaply as you can. But still, if you were able to show that, given our expertise in being able to fix and invest and then find the right buyer, then we can actually buy buy your flat at a higher price than you would be able to sell otherwise.
Absolutely.
It would be so strong argument.
Exactly. We're really, our ethos is kind of really trying to optimize all the steps that we do so that we can give the highest possible offer to the seller, to us. So there should be a no-brainer in the end. And I think there's already cases where, because they just know they don't want to go through, let's say one simple case is like a dödsbo or something where you really don't want to spend months of cleaning it up. And that's just what we have had a few of those. And then, so if you were to sell it in the current condition, we have paid better. Like now we can say we can pay you 50K more than you would maximum get on open market because we will make the effort. Otherwise someone else would buy it and maybe make an upside in a couple of years when they sell it because they did go through all the effort of refurbishing it and cleaning it up. And so definitely that's already the case in some cases. But then you also have the angle of buying from, kind of the branding aspect, and that we can guarantee you certain quality of life from selling our home. And if you buy a home from us, if something is broken, sure as hell we will go out and fix it for you directly. So like we want to have really happy customers, both from the sellers and the buyers from us. So I think buying from us should have value adds in terms that you can sort of have a company responsible for someone you trust.
Trustworthy AI. Trustworthy. And this is trustworthy or brokership or
service. Trusting in the service in the company.
What do you call like the brokership of buying and selling apartments and stuff?
Real estate.
Trustworthy real estate, right? That's
it is funny because this morning I was reading through an article of jobs that they will disappear in 10 years from now. HR was one of them. Lawyers was one of them. And the third one was a real estate broker.
I think so.
So this is funny, actually. I think.
It could be the reason sitting here.
But in general, if you see it, I think this is a genius idea. I have myself went through several of this buying and selling, and I think it's a process that is stressing everybody out. And I had like a very big misfortune to bet on a wrong horse, because when you're selling an apartment, you're also betting on a horse. which is basically the real estate guy.
Yes.
And how good he is. Yeah. I will sell it. I have my contacts, all of these other things. And then on the end, it turns out that he's basically he might be making deal behind your back with somebody who is cousin actually to underpress it, right? And you don't know. I'm not saying that is the case, which turned out to be the case for my last apartment. But in general, it's a very stressful experience. And if we are looking at the whole digital economy, is actually about selling convenience. This is starting with Steve Jobs, like one button solution, everything is one. And this is as well a beautiful example of it. It's a stressful situation of 3-4 months, 6 months.
I really hope to also bring, increased sort of transparency and liquidity on the market. Exactly. That it's like less of a game. We even considered like actually selling with the kind of closed biddings that you have in other countries, that you can't get this like hectic bidding of like either we have a minimum price that we need. We don't need to maximize necessarily price. We need to get back our margins, and then we just want to find a new owner as soon as possible. So like having a closed bidding is more kind of fair in that sense. That
there is a catch. There is a catch. So the current market is defined by basically how many people are bidding on the market.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So if more people are bidding on the market, the prices are actually going up. And in Stockholm, they have been going up for 30% in the past, 10 years or something like that. So let's imagine the scenario there. You have 1 or 2 companies right now that are similar to Movesta, right? Which are determining the price point based on, because right now you're collecting data because it's a free market, people are bidding. And let's say in 10 years from now, there are 2 companies, nobody's bidding, everything is going through the process. Yeah. So then how is the value of the market being defined? Yeah,
so I think it's unlikely, even though we think this kind of service is for everyone, not for just a niche, then, there will be, I think we believe for a long time, a large fraction of the market will sell kind of with the current. But definitely that's also kind of the strategy as a company that, with scale, of course, we learn the most about the specific homes that we sell and buy. So then we have even more details, even more features. We know exactly kind of what is sold for. And also we can, of course, decide if we're public with the prices. I think we will be for a long time, because we want to make sure that if you sell to us, and then, of course, 3 months later, we're going to sell it. So completely, and that's open. We're open about, so we told you.
I will be a bit nasty if you have like 20%
exactly.
plus there.
Exactly. So if we tell you that your home is worth only 2 million, and then we sell it for 4 million, of course, that's going to be noticed. So we want to really give very important that we give for kind of long-term customer satisfaction, that we give a very fair market price. Yeah. And then, of course, deduce our costs from that for discount, but like that it's open.
It was not really the question, but I understand. So the problem is that the market is right now defined by the free market and people bidding on it, right?
Yeah.
So when you have one company defining the price range, let's say, and there is nobody else, there is no real estate.
Always,
you understand? So that is
some sort of bidding. It's a question of like supply and demand that it has to be there in a sense. There has to be some sort of.
My point was not to be negative to it. It is more that this is the way, and this is clearly the way how it's going to be in the future. So you're on the right path. But then when you're looking at the whole market, that means that there will need to be some kind of a changes of how this is regulated in order to grow. So maybe closer working with insurance companies, closer working with bank, benchmarking between countries, benchmarking between regions, and etc. Because if you're a standalone definition of how the pricing is on the market, there is nobody else to bid, then you define the market. And that is actually a little bit of a problem.
Because a bit of an extreme case as well, but I see your point. But also if you look at our kind of really long-term vision, even reconsidering like how we own our homes in the first place, it's quite insane how it currently works. Like why private people making orders of magnitudes bigger investment in a single riskful, absurd. Why are we forced? That's just broken. So I think long-term we really want to investigate that. We want to kind of build this ecosystem and platform to be able to facilitate people moving homes, or like the way that you live, the way. And I think long term, definitely we're looking at aspects of how do you structure the ownership of homes? Like does it work this way?
It has happened for books, it happens for music, it happened for movies, it happened for cabs, taxi rides. It will happen for real estate as well.
We're pretty convinced that
it must.
There's a better way.
But speaking of the bidding process as well, you of course are using more data-driven and machine learning approaches to value the house. What about the bidding process or finding the buyer, etc.? Are you planning to also use a more data-driven approach there?
So today we pretty much sell the homes with the help of a partner broker on the open market, very standard way. So we kind of utilize, of course, their skills and like what's.
Couldn't you make that also?
But for sure, I mean that's definitely that's in our vision is really about can we by data-driven methods
or digitize
by data-driven methods optimize every step of the process so that it becomes scalable, and that's so that we're closer to true market value. We can pay the seller better, make everyone, the seller and the buyer, more happy.
I think everyone can recognize, when you're in a bidding process and you don't know if you're going to stop or not. I mean, that's a typical machine learning problem.
But exactly, so that's another kind of not sidetrack, but given all the data that we collect, there's loads of exciting, like this is Friday hack problems, right?
Yes.
Just looking at, everything from like which brokers are given the what's it called, this scam, the listing, the like the really low acceptance prices or not. I mean, you can figure out a lot of funny, and also looking at the bidding history, like how typically can you predict the outcome of a bidding depending on the number of bidders.
It's impossible to do for a human. I mean, you need AI.
So I really believe, currently brokers that are active in a specific area, they are very good at valuing homes because they know they have like a list of potential buyers in their book, right? So they kind of know what the demand is, and they have all this knowledge. But I'm still absolutely convinced that you can go way beyond human performance in the valuation of homes, because the human can never kind of grasp all these details on. So
Awesome. I think we could speak about this forever, but time is flying away. Anders, what's next in your life? What's happening personally, professionally? You going to continue in your cave and hacking on the modeling part? Or?
Now we've spent so much time on modeling for a couple of weeks, and now it's probably back to some more boring, mundane tasks for a bit. But definitely we are. So we're growing a lot. I mean, we really kind of think we have a playbook that works now in a kind of this current scale, and we're hiring people. That's an exciting but also time-consuming process. So we have actually just 2 new members that have signed to join the team. It's not official yet who they are, but that's an exciting kind of the Movesta side of things to grow the company and now really start scaling the kind of playbook that we have. Personally, I mentioned the refurbishment this summer, kind of mix of I don't know, pain and looking forward to have a very nice.
Could that be another side business for Movesta to help refurbish homes, since you have the expertise?
But ultimately we do it. It's a good timing when people are not living there, right? So that's a good timing to refurbish anyway in between owners. But yeah, so sure
you would like to have that, right?
Otherwise, looking forward to the summer and hanging out with my daughter Vega and wife.
Any music endeavors?
Oh yeah. We'll see. Now there's been so many things. Yeah, we talked about it earlier a bit before the start of the podcast, I guess. But I will have to stay low on that for a bit now during a lot of work and a lot of taking care of my daughter and the refurbishment.
Do you get the bass out at home or the guitar out at home, or is it just in the case for now?
For now, it's in the case for the nearest months. But I hope maybe after the summer to be able to spend some more time after the refurbishment is done.
Sounds good.
Cool.
And hopefully we can start meetups outdoors as well.
At
some point soon as well.
I look forward to that. Being able.
We need to do a summer show from Värmdö, I think. Like, René's Brygga, but AI Bryggan.
You just say, prepare the, your place. We are coming. No problem.
We can do it. No problem.
No problem at all.
Anders, anyone that you would recommend to this show? Someone that you would like to listen to yourself?
I sort of you did kind of warn me about that. I should have prepared something, but I did. I think one person that I haven't been in touch with in a while that would be fun to hear is Lars. Lars, he hasn't been on the podcast, right?
No.
So he was.
Is he back in Sweden now? Or?
No, he's on
Korea still.
No, he's in London, I think.
Right, Facebook, of course.
I think he has a fun journey of. I mean, I followed him a bit. He hired me for Botti, and then he was at Peltarian where I came later on. So we have kind of a little bit, but also very diverging past. I think very exciting. I think Patrik Tran for Validio, fun upcoming project they're on too. I mean, he's an interesting person. And I also thought of Anna Backlund. She is heading the AI efforts at ICA.
Yeah.
and have a kind of a mentorship collaboration with her. We can try to exchange learnings, and she's an interesting learnings from data and AI at ICA.
That's great.
So maybe I think you should definitely check with those.
Yeah, that's some really good names.
Yeah, and I mean they of course don't know that I recommend them here, but I'm sure you. Yeah.
Awesome. Anders Huss, as usual, always a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you can enjoy your coming weeks, not only by refurbishing, but also doing some proper modeling and other fun stuff.
Yeah, but, adding people to the team, I look unreasonably a lot forward to. I mean,
that's cool.
It's fun. It's always fun to get new energy, new stuff happening. So that's good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.